So I want to welcome everybody to the Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, May 6th, 2026. The agenda tonight consists just of the budget. We will be doing the operating budget. We will be going through the CIP items. We will be doing conditions of appropriation. And then hopefully taking a vote on the omnibus budget. Um, we are going to start the meeting with public comment. We've had, if you're a member of the public and wish to speak on budget related issues, um, uh, put your name in the chat. We already have one person who has signed up. She doesn't need to put her name in the chat. There's a question on how did the override affect our vote on the budget. There is an override budget, which is what I assume we will take the operating budget vote on, although there are at least two possible changes to that. One is to the legal budget, one is a condition of appropriation. I believe we have our free cash has been, I believe, certified by the Commonwealth. And so we will be going through the CIP items. And then, as I said, we'll take an overall vote on the omnibus budget. We're going to start with public comment. And the first person and the only one who signed up so far is Emily Jacobson. Emily, we usually give people 3 minutes. You appeared to have a lot, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you for taking my public comment. Um, so I sent you a summary of the comments I want to make. Um, I attached for you a year-over-year summary of transportation funding that I pulled from town meeting files. And I'd just like to draw your attention to the large increase in roadway rehabilitation funding. Um, I am completely in favor of this increase. I absolutely, we need to prevent our roads from falling further apart. If we delay maintenance, it only makes them more costly to repair. However, um, this increase in roadway spending has also come, and I believe that the Transportation Board um, doesn't have effective oversight over the funds that are being spent because we just saw what happened on Harvard Street, which a lot of town meeting members wrote to the select board about and to the transportation board about, and came as a big surprise to a lot of people that live near Harvard Street, um, was that the transportation division undertook a $3.1 million transportation and mobility improvement project along Harvard Street. We were told that this was just a paving project, but in reality, it has a lot more than that in the paving project. And the problem with this is really that the transportation division has a lot of um, uh, like dual tasks. They have to pave the road, but they also are responsible for things like Vision Zero, complete streets, and this really large increased roadway budget. It comes at the same time that the transportation division staff have completely turned over in the department. And so I think there is maybe a lack of institutional knowledge within the department. And um, it also comes at the same time that there are a number of new policies that went into effect. And I think that's part of the reason why this project went ahead without the transportation board first being consulted about it. And I just think it's a really odd situation that you would have a $3.1 million project with a board that appears to have, um, I don't want to say authority, but it appears to be the board that is responsible for reviewing this work, but then that board is also not aware that that this project is being planned and is not consulted before the contract is approved by the select board. And I understand that the transportation board at the moment is undergoing a sort of a priority setting process, but that process is in the beginning stages, and I think the process will take into hand this allocation of how the CIP is going to be allocated and clarify the process of projects coming before the transportation board before they are set in stone already. But I think it would just be a common sense step for town meeting and for the advisory board to clarify in the appropriation of the roadway rehab money that those funds should be, when a project is undertaken with those funds, that project should be approved and recommended by the transportation board. And so that's the gist of it. You have a bunch of backup material that I had given you that clarifies why I think this is important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Melissa, I have a question for you. Should we hit the CIP first, the conditions of appropriation, or the operating budget?
Whatever you prefer. I can go in either order. Doesn't matter.
Okay, let's get the CIP out of the way. So maybe you could explain to us what the deal was with free cash and if the problem's been solved.
Sure. So we were waiting for longer than normal for our certification. So when we put out the financial plan, we had an estimate for free cash. That estimate was a little bit too high, so we had to make some adjustments. So I can walk you through kind of what the differences were and where the adjustments are. I spoke to Carol earlier today. She's aware of these changes. And so I'll just kind of go through where we're at with that. Let me just pull up my spreadsheet.
Do you need me to make you a co-host?
Yep.
Melissa, I will just say that the advisory committee is not aware of any of the changes that the capital subcommittee made to the CIP that was originally published.
Yep. But we can talk through those two as I'm going through them as well. Okay. Okay, so on the left here is what we had originally had in the financial plan. And then on the right here, and I can make it bigger if that's helpful for people. On the right here is what's actually happened. So there was a difference of $1.9 million between what we had estimated and what the actual was. The recommendations for the first 4 buckets have not changed. So there's no change in any of those. The recommendation for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund does change because that is based on what's available after these first 4 buckets are satisfied. So just by virtue of applying the formula, there is a reduction to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So what's available for special use is actually decreased by $1.6 million. You'll note here that under special use, there are now 2 lines where there used to be 1. So we have additional CIP, and then we have this new line called Affordable Housing Trust Fund Interest Adjustment. So the HAB had a conversation about the way that their funds were invested, and there was a conversation about changing their strategy for investment of funds. There was a delay in the implementation of the adoption of the strategy. So this is the town's attempt to make them whole so that they are receiving the interest that they would have been able to receive had the policy been implemented in a timely way. So this 116,186 is what we believe would have gone to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund if the interest strategy had changed when it was supposed to. So that means that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund would be getting $1,070,667 under that scenario. That means that we've got a shortfall in the CIP of about $1.7 million. So now I'm going to walk you through how we're bringing the CIP into balance based on that. So, and this is just my scratches walking through it again. So you have the shortfall overall, the reduction that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund gets just by virtue of the policy, the correction to provide the interest to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Here's the CIP shortfall. This first $100,000 is actually a recommendation of the capital subcommittee. There was a wayfinding program that was in the CIP proposed by the planning department. The capital subcommittee did not feel that that was an appropriate use of CIP. So their recommendation was to reduce the funding. So that is something that we are willing to carry forward into the recommendations overall. The second reduction here is $125,000. That is coming from the rehab replacement of Rescue One, which is a piece of equipment in the fire department. During the public hearing for this item, the fire chief acknowledged that Rescue One actually doesn't make a lot of runs, doesn't come out very often. So there is really no need for a rehab at this time. And we have bumped it out in the CIP. I think originally it was supposed to be in 24. We bumped it out to 27. He still thinks the piece is in good shape. So we don't need the 125 at this point. And we may not need it. Maybe simple repairs would be sufficient to deal with the vehicle going forward. But at this point, that's funding that he acknowledged was not needed. Then the capital subcommittee also had a conversation about the classroom capacity account and the terms of the lease. And the leases have a CPI contingent in it. And based on the CPI, the capital subcommittee felt that the reduction in classroom capacity, the 24.5, was able to be handled in that account as well. Then in further conversations with Charlie Simmons, as he's working towards getting the HVAC program for Town Hall in place, he felt that there was a shortfall of about $50,000, which the capital subcommittee was recommending go into that budget for Town Hall HVAC. So based on all of these adjustments, we still have a shortfall of about $1.5 million. And so in talking with Lincoln and talking with our chief assessor, and looking at what we have available, we're already using overlay as part of the funding strategy overall for the CIP, looking to see if there was a further balance that we might be able to squeeze out of the overlay account. And so they feel comfortable releasing $1,550,000. So that will essentially resolve this balance and allow us to not have to make any further adjustments to the CIP. So I've got—
Melissa, could you explain to those of us who don't know exactly what the overlay account is?
Sure. So we, this is an amount that we have. It's not part of what town meeting appropriates, but it is essentially a reserve in case there are challenges to tax bills during the course of the year, that if those challenges prevail, there's a way to provide rebates to the taxpayer. So there are various cases that are kind of making their way through the tax appellate process. And so based on when cases settle, sometimes the reserve can be closed out if there's no need. And sometimes the reserve gets carried forward until the cases get resolved. So the surpluses are determined by the Board of Assessors. And I believe that the vote is being planned for next week to allow us to access those funds in time for town meeting.
Thank you. So Carol, do you want to take it from here? I've made you a co-host in case you wish to show anything.
Oh, so I can go through it line item by line item.
Okay.
I can also pull up the budget table and do it that way too, Carol, if you want.
Let me use the report that I provided earlier today. And you said you've made me a co-host. Let's see.
Yes, I have.
Okay. Let me find how to share my screen.
So at the very bottom, there's a green arrow called share.
I see that now. Thank you.
And then it'll bring up your screen on your computer and you click on the document that you want to share.
Okay. Let me just find the right document.
I have it up, Carol, if you'd like me to share it.
Oh, That would be great, unless I just succeeded in getting it up.
Harry, do you want to make me a
I just have, yes.
Okay, that'll be easier, thank you. So we're gonna, I'll say it and then we're gonna vote each one, Harry, is that the plan?
I think unless, what I would suggest is that if somebody has an issue or a problem or wants a separate vote on any particular item, we can do that. However, if nobody does or whatever items are left over, we can take sort of an omnibus vote on the remaining CIP items.
All right, so, do you have it up, Lisa?
Yes, it is, we can see it.
Okay, I can't see it, but I'll look at it on my screen. So the first item is general government, and the first item is 350,000 for town building rehabilitation. This is distinct from school building rehabilitation. And we don't always fund this account, but we are funding it this year. It's for general deferred maintenance kind of upgrades, painting, carpeting, flooring, bathroom upgrades.
Excuse me, Carol and Lisa, could you make that a little bit larger on the screen? Thank you.
And in fiscal year 27, it's gonna be work at the senior center, the environmental building, the public safety building, town hall, and the health department. So, there's no questions. The next one is technology infrastructure. And this was one item that the capital subcommittee had originally increased. And now we've decreased it down to what it was originally in the preliminary CIP of $100,000. And this is to fund the migration of systems to the cloud. And don't ask me which systems, I don't remember. But if we had more money, we would have gotten some additional modules for Munis, but those will have to wait for a later date. The next thing is 195,000 for the police radio system upgrade. You may recall when the police were in, they were talking about the need to do certain upgrades to the system because the city of Boston encrypted their system. And that's what this $195,000 is primarily paying for. That and some compatibility upgrades with the Commonwealth's upgraded radio system. The next item is traffic calming for $100,000. Again, when DPW was in here, they went over their program and how they established the priorities. So this is funding existing requests. They said 31 outstanding requests.
We have a question from Linda Olsen-Pelkey.
Yeah, Carol, how does this amount relate to what's been budgeted in the CIP in the past for traffic calming?
Oh, that's a good question. Melissa, do you have that handy?
Sure, I can say that it is lower than prior year, but the 50,000 has been the placeholder that we've had for this item for several years, and that there is currently a backlog in the existing appropriations. So that's why we're at the placeholder level at this point. But I can pull up last year's plan if you just give me a minute and can let you know what that was.
Well, you just said 50,000 was the placeholder, but this is budgeting 100,000.
Yes. So let's see. I'm sorry. We had tried to bump up the placeholder. 50 historically was the placeholder for a long time. Last year, the funding was at 350.
Okay, and do we think the backlog is because of the financing or because of just the amount of work to process and evaluate the requests?
I think it's related to the vacancy in the transportation division that, now that it's full, I think that we'll probably see some movement there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
So moving on, the next item is, oh, Janice?
Yes, sorry, I do have a question on this one too. So traffic calming, typically what's made the backlog so bad has been doing complete streets in conjunction with traffic calming. That's what happened on Woodland Road, for instance, where it started out as a traffic calming quest, but then it morphed into an entire sort of reconstruction of the roadway and the tree lawn and new curbing. I'm just wondering whether, I know the select board were looking at sort of changing the way we're doing things so that we can get this backlog of dealing with road improvements in general, get it covered a little bit faster. So is the town thinking of separating out traffic calming?
Well, we have been, you may recall, Janice, there was a lot of complaints and tittering about all the speed humps that have been put in Fisher Hill, on Tappan Street. So based on the way those projects have moved forward, I would say the two have been separated.
Okay, thank you.
Can I move on?
Yes.
Okay, so the next thing is bicycle access improvements. This is $50,000 to match and fund the expansion of the Blue Bikes program. I don't know the details of the expansion. If anyone's interested, I can help you with that one. I don't know if Melissa does. Then the next thing.
Carol, I would just point out to people that when we did the different departments, like these departments are related mostly to DPW, we did have the opportunity to ask DPW staff what was going on and what these were about. So I have no problem taking questions tonight, but there was a previous opportunity to go into greater detail with the people who knew a little bit more about it. Just
Right.
point that out.
The School Street pedestrian bicycle safety lighting. This is a project that's being shared with the Pierce School building project. So this Pierce School project installed, I'm assuming these were under pavement conduits and bases for this new lighting. And then the town is paying for the actual lights to go in, which are going to be dark sky compliant.
Carlos has a question.
Yeah, yes, Carol, can you remind me, is this the one where they were cutting down all the remaining trees down to put in the bike lane? Was that the discussion that we had?
I don't remember, Carlos.
I believe so.
Street rehab, $5,258,000. You may recall when DPW was in, they went through their paving rating index and how they basically rate every mile of roadway in the town. And they use that to set both priorities and determine what type of paving work they're going to be doing. And that's what this is funding. So for fiscal year 27, they're hoping to do 2.62 miles of roadway.
We have two questions here. The first from Perry Grossman.
Yeah, I just want to echo Emily Jacobson's concerns from earlier about the need to have Transportation Board review these projects, and I think the ramp policy, does make some sense in getting quick fixes done, but we do need to look at these broader bike safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Ladd.
Well, can I just ask Melissa something? Is the language for this appropriation subject to the approval? Does the Transportation Board need to approve things over 100,000?
So they have never been part of the approval authority in this particular condition of appropriation. So this is actually categorized under engineering/highway, not transportation, which is why it is not something that normally goes to them for review. I think we will be debating this at town meeting because I'm hearing that there is a budget amendment trying to insert them into the approval authority. So we'll have a conversation about that when the item gets filed.
Thank
Okay.
you. Brian Ladd.
Yeah, I think most of my concerns have just been covered by Perry and Melissa and Carol here. But, well, let me just ask again, as a newcomer, I assumed that historically the Transportation Board has had little or nothing to do with this committee because it is not seen as a body that has budgetary control. But am I wrong about that? And if that is the case, the sort of debates that Melissa's referring to going to bring up something new about inserting the Transportation Board into things that have historically not been involved directly with budget issues?
I think that's what I'm hearing, is that there is a desire to have the Transportation Board provide oversight on the entirety of the street rehab program, which traditionally has not been the case.
Okay, thanks.
Michael Berger.
Yes, actually, the Transportation Board, I believe, makes recommendations on the allocation of the TNC funds. In that case, they do have some budgetary recommendations.
They do anything that's under the CIP, under transportation. The Transportation Board is involved in the formulation of those projects, just like Park and Rec is involved in anything that's under the Parks Division for the CIP as well.
So they would have budgetary, not approval, but they certainly have budgetary recommendations.
I believe they provide input to staff on the formulation of CIP requests.
Thank you.
Ready to move on?
Yes.
So the next item is sidewalk repair, $539,000. 149 miles of sidewalk are in town. Who knew? It's an impressive number. They didn't give us a mileage estimate for how far that 539,000 miles are going. But they did talk to us, as you may remember, about their program. They're trying to rate the sidewalks in the same way they are trying to rate the streets to help prioritize them. And they have a third-party vendor coming in who's taking care of some of the smaller repairs where it's a matter of shaving down sidewalks that are uneven, and they feel that that's been a very fruitful program. The next item is the transfer station remediation. You are all familiar with the issues surrounding the failure of the tilting floor in the transfer station, and how I think it was in January, we approved a reserve fund transfer to do the design work for putting up a temporary structure.
We have a question from Jocelyn.
Okay, and Erin came in and her team, and they gave us pictures. They showed us what this temporary structure is going to look like and where it's going to be on the transfer station grounds. Jocelyn.
Thanks very much. Just for the record, my understanding is that this wasn't simply a failure. It was damage caused by, whether it was accidental or not, it was damage that was caused by a Casella employee when the excavator arm or box was dropped on the floor. But regardless of that, my question is why this item doesn't appear under sanitation as a budgeted capital item. It appears instead under engineering and highway, but it's clearly part of the sanitation division.
So I would just say that's because the sanitation division has never had a CIP category. So I put it in with what I thought was kind of a grouping that was similar. So, that's why it wasn't broken out separately.
Okay, thank you.
Carol.
Okay. No more questions on the transfer station. Then we go on to the only thing that was contentious in the capital subcommittee meetings was the Washington Street Rehab and Complete Streets program. 800,000 from the town. Currently, the total estimated cost is about 30 million. And the town's projected total investment is going to be 11.8 million. So we did pass this by, I believe, a vote of 5-1, with one person voting no. And if he wants to bring up his issues, he's more than welcome to. But that's why this is in here. 800,000 for Washington Street Rehab and the Complete Streets program.
We have a question from David Mark.
Just a quick one. Are we sure we're getting that federal funding? Is it already in the bank ready to be spent, or is it still to be determined?
I believe we are still on the tip for the state program. So when we're on the tip, that means that we are in the queue for funding. So as far as I am aware, we are still on track.
Okay, thank you.
The next item is stormwater improvements, a utility bond. We've been doing this amount for a number of years now, and it's projected to stay at this amount for a number of years.
Carol,
then-
your screen isn't moving. We're still seeing.
Oh,
complete
I'm
screen.
sorry. It's because Lisa's sharing it and I'm scrolling on my own screen. Lisa, could you move up to the stormwater improvements, please?
She moved it. She moved
Thank
it.
you. So this is basically to fund and provide for the capacity in our stormwater system to deal with these stronger weather events. The next item is water system improvements, $2 million. Again, I believe we've been pretty consistent in the $2 million over the last few years. There's been an inventory of the town service lines. No known lead was found, but there are approximately 9,000 service lines in Brookline, and 108 of them are unknowns. And they're assuming that those contain lead, so those have to be addressed.
Carol, you may want to clarify that these are all part of the enterprise.
These are all right, it says utility bonds, so those are separate from the CIP funding that Melissa went through. Those are self-supporting from the Water Enterprise Fund. Thank you, Carlos.
And we have a comment from Janice Kahn.
No, just a clarification. So, if you scroll back, they both had the same name, but weren't they different projects? You described them differently.
Well, one was
and water
stormwater.
system.
Yeah, but it says
Water system and wastewater. Those are the two
I see.
distinctions.
Okay.
So stormwater, wastewater, water systems.
Oh, I see. You went ahead. I didn't, because I'm looking on my own screen.
I see. Okay, thanks, Melissa.
I don't think we saw the stormwater one.
Well, that's what I was questioning.
Okay, so
It should be.
Lisa, could you scroll back up to show the stormwater improvements for 500,000? So
Yeah.
there's 3 of them. Stormwater for 500K, water system improvements for 2 million, and then wastewater system, which is our sewers that are our sanitary sewers, for 3 million. So this is to maintain and rehabilitate that. No, any questions?
No.
All right, so we're on to big belly compacting waste stations. Everyone knows what the big bellies are. And the DPW is constantly expanding the number of big bellies there are, or replacing ones that have had issues. So that's 145,000, and it seems to be helping on the rodent problem. Sewell Athletic Fields, 1,150,000. This will be a comprehensive redesign of the Sewell Recreation Area, including.
I'm sorry, we have a question from Jocelyn when you're done.
Okay, including accessibility improvements, replacing the playground, access issues, the fields. This is the design fee stage of it, so it's not for the actual construction work.
Jocelyn?
Thank you. My question was actually about big bellies because I've seen quite a few complaints about big bellies being full so that they don't, the openings don't close and so forth. Are those big bellies part of the Casella contract? In other words, are Casella employees responsible for emptying those big bellies?
I believe they're picked up by DPW, but I can confirm that. And
Yeah, that's my understanding also. DPW is doing the parks. And the big.
Okay, I had a different understanding, so I would be interested in the answer. Thank you.
Yep.
Alec Lebovitz.
Can I also just quickly ask on the big bellies, do we know where those will be placed? And do we have a sense of how many, if any of them, will be placed in the Coolidge Corner area?
I don't know if any of them will be placed in Coolidge Corner. It says it's adding 14 new Big Belly trash and recycling units. But we did not get a list of where they're going.
I would just suggest that Coolidge Corner definitely has a need. So if not this year, that should be, I think, attention should be paid there at some point.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Fran Perler.
Sorry, I had to unmute. My understanding has been that the big bellies are emptied by the town and not by Casella. And I would second Alex's comment that we need more of them in Coolidge Corner, because every time I walk there, I send a Brook Online comment that it's overflowing. So they need some more over there. Thank you.
Okay, anything more on the Big Belly? Going once, going twice. You already did the Sula athletic fields. We're on to the new Lincoln School grounds. This was something that was originally in last year's CIP that got removed for a variety of reasons and is now back. And this is for the design stage of redoing those grounds. And if you've been over there recently, you know that they look a little well-worn. Parks and Recreation, this is $325,000. This is for everything except the playground equipment is the way I've understood it, and various parks. And it's trying to do an intermediate level attention and repairs to these parks to prevent them from needing a full makeover. It's trying to extend their lives. Town school grounds rehab. This is looking at the landscaping and the hardscaping of both town and school grounds. So it says it doesn't include replacement of areas over building structures. So it doesn't include stairways and ramps, but it includes the walkways through the parks. Tree removal and replacement, urban forestry management, $365,000. This is requested annually. I know there was some concern that we haven't kept up with it, but the town now has a new arborist and a new sort of tree surgeon. We're now fully staffed basically in that department, and the hope is that we can catch up with the backlog and start turning our attention to other areas that need work. It says, in addition, some of the funding is going to ongoing management work at the conservation areas, Halls Pond, Amory Woods Sanctuary, D. Blakely Horse Sanctuary, and the Lost Pond Sanctuary. The next item is the Walnut Hill Cemetery, $600,000, and this is really going to be used for repaving the roadways and addressing drainage issues at the cemetery.
Carol, can I just note that that this funding is divided in half. So half of it is coming from a special revenue fund that town meeting does need to appropriate. And then the other half is coming from a cemetery trust fund that town meeting does not need to appropriate. So on the budget table, you'll see 300,000. And I believe that the trustees may have voted this last week.
So does that mean for our write-up, it needs to be changed to 300,000 or?
Yeah, 300. You can describe that the entirety of the funding is 600 and that 300 of it is appropriated by town meeting.
Okay. Let me just make that note. Okay, thank you, Melissa. Let's see. The next thing is the Strategic Solar Initiative, 3.2 million. Oops, lost my Zoom. there. 3.2 million. And we went over this with Aaron and Alexandria DeVecchio when the sustainability division was in. And this is they're calling it 2 tracks. The first track is going to be putting new solar panels at BHS, the Village Library, the Fire Station 1, and the Hayes School. And the goal is to get these done in time to qualify for a federal investment tax credit. Then the second track of the program, they're hoping will also qualify for some state tax credits. And those will be at there's 22 potential sites that have been identified throughout town suitable for solar panels. And so the goal is to spend this 3.2 million to both take advantage of the tax credits out there at the federal and state level and to start helping address these increasing utility bills that we have.
A question from David Mark.
Thank you. Just a quick question. If we do fund this year, how long until those panels will go online?
The first track panels have to be online by the end of, I think it's December of this year. Oh, no, they have to be connected by December 31st, 2027.
All right, thank you.
So sometime before then. Excuse me. Let's see, the next item is the Evelyn Current Aquatic Center, filtration system. And this is to replace the filtration system for all the pools, 3.2 million. The next item, driving range lighting, needs to get removed. We voted previously that we weren't going to do this. Though I didn't remember that. It's been brought to my attention. And you know what, Melissa, you probably don't have that in your calculations, or do you?
Sorry, can you say that again?
The advisory previously voted not to move this forward, this 300,000. I guess it doesn't matter since it came out of the Gulf retained earnings.
Right. So I have not been able to present this to the board. So I have it in the table, but if you vote against it, I will basically have the board decide whether or not they want to try and make a motion for it. So.
Okay.
We have already previously voted no action on it. So as far as the advisory committee is concerned, it is gone.
I have a two-finger on this, Harry, if I could.
Sure.
So I think one of the votes was 350,000. And if you look at the request for the fund, I believe it was 350. And it was a little bit ambiguously positioned as 300,000 for the lighting and 50,000 for additional improvements in cart paths. And I think the vote that we took last week was for 350,000 to remove. So that's a little bit, that has to be cleaned up a little bit.
I think the CIP table, which is where I got this number, had the $300,000 figure in it. So I'm not sure where we came up with the 350.
Jocelyn, do you recall your motion?
Yes, my motion was for the CIP item. We voted no action on this particular item for $300,000 is my recollection.
I'll withdraw my comment then.
Yes, and I was with the advisory committee when the board was taking up their budget votes, so I wasn't able to walk them through the differences between what advisory has already done and where the board was. So when they take this up on Tuesday, we'll talk about whether or not they want to move this.
Yeah, Melissa, I think this is the only thing that full advisory has voted on. Everything else we'll be voting on tonight. Even where Cap Sub may have made some changes, those were not voted on by full advisory.
Yeah, I think the building department appropriation might be another item that the full AC may have voted on.
Right, and the removal of the planning, we haven't voted on also. Or the fire truck, none of those things. So do we need to vote do we need to vote separately to remove those? Or to
No.
no action?
well, Yes, if we're gonna remove them tonight by
Okay.
advisory.
I have them all called out in the table too, so we can walk through it there as well.
Okay.
Janice Khan, you have a comment.
Yes, I do on the driving, on the lighting. Melissa, when you present it, you should understand why, the reason why we pulled it. They hadn't done any of the things that they should have done prior to putting it on the CIP. So it was really felt to be very premature to do
Yeah,
it
and
now.
if anyone wants to send me an email that I can,
Yeah.
include in the board's packet, I'm happy to do that as well.
Great.
Can we go on?
Yes.
All right, let's see, HVAC equipment. This is a reoccurring line item for public buildings, and it's to replace failing HVAC equipment. What is new this year is the next line item, HVAC enhancements for 280,000, and that's specifically to deal with the extra cost associated with putting in heat pumps where those are appropriate. Let's see, town hall HVAC electrification. Most of you are aware that last summer there was a major failure at town hall, and so instead of just replacing with with what was there, they're upgrading to an all-electric system. And originally in the CIP, it was 2.9 million. Charlie's gotten all his quotes in, or his bids in, I should say, and requested an extra 50,000. So that's why it's now 2,950,000. Town school building ADA renovations. Again, this is a reoccurring item that we have every year to make sure we're meeting the Americans with Disability Act requirements. And also these funds are used to respond to if there's an issue with a particular student or a particular employee and we need to make accommodations in the built environment for them. Excuse me. Town school building energy conservation, 215,000. This is for all the excuse me. This is These are things that Charlie does to decrease our energy usage in buildings. It can be management systems or other conservation programs that are out there, some of which qualify for utility rebates. Town school, excuse me, town school energy management systems, 130,000. This is constantly needing to upgrade the software and occasionally the hardware for these computerized energy management systems that all the buildings have, so that the heat comes on when someone comes in the room and gets throttled back when someone leaves. Town school building and envelope fenestration. This is the outside walls and the windows of the buildings. Again, this is an annual appropriation, and Charlie has a 20-year plan that he completed in 26, but is rolling over into a new plan. Same thing is true for the roof repair and replacement program, $2 million. Charlie notes that he tries to do this the same year that he's doing the building envelope. It's just easier to have all the work done on a particular school at the same time. Public building fire alarm upgrades, 700,000. Again, this is something that we're constantly, you finish one plan and you start a new plan. Security life systems, 250,000. He's trying to address weaknesses in existing buildings, in addition to making sure everything is up to the same standard. These computerized locking systems, whether it be a fob or an ID badge, are, you know, expensive to operate, and when something breaks, you got to replace it. School rehab and repair. We are giving $500,000 in new money, and then there was a little less than 1.3 million from previous years in these accounts that we're reappropriating to do mini CIP work for fiscal year 27, according to a table that was attached. I don't know if Lisa, if you can pull that up for a minute instead of this, so people can see what the projects are for this year. The capital subcommittee has been working hard with the schools and with Charlie to get a better definition of deferred maintenance and to make sure that these funds are not used for either new program initiatives or, I think this needs, can people see that? Is it large enough?
No.
It could be a little bigger.
I don't know if Lisa can.
There.
There, thank you. So we're trying to be consistent in defining what is deferred maintenance, and that's painting, carpeting, ceiling tiles, and bathroom refreshes, you know, replacing fixtures or partitions, repairing floors. It is not, these funds are not intended to renovate for a new purpose or say a new policy like gender neutral bathrooms. So between the 500,000 and the monies that were previously appropriated but not spent, there are major projects that are going to be done at Hayes, BHS, Lawrence, and the Lynch Center, which does have some educational activities. So 1.7 million Charlie's planning to do this year. If we can go back to the other list, please, Lisa.
Yep, give me a minute.
There's only one thing left, our all-time favorite, the classroom capacity leases. So maybe you don't really need to see it. That's 784,842. And at this point, the schools have 2 leases for BEAT programs, one at Ojai Shalom and one at Temple Emmett. And both of those leases, as Melissa mentioned, have annual CIP increases that are capped at 6%. And unbeknownst to us, what the schools have been doing every year is just increasing the previous year by 6%. So we decided that we look at what the most likely CIP is for the year and did I believe it was a 3% increase. So that's why there was about an extra $25,000 taken out of the original request. And that is the CIP. Any other?
Melissa, absent voting on any of these separately, if somebody were to request, do we have one big bad number?
So we have a special appropriation number of 22,409,889, and then you have bond finance CIP items which are called out separately, and those are 12,700,000.
12,700,000 for bonds. Okay, and does the 22 include I'm forgetting now, the
Golf course? No,
the golf course lighting.
no, it does not.
Okay. And David, Mark, you have a question?
On that very subject, actually, Harry, when we X'd out the money for the golf club, the lighting system, where did that money go back into?
That
So
money goes back to the golf people because it's an enterprise fund and it's part of their reserves.
Yeah,
So
the
it's
funding
not-
sources, the funding sources retained earnings.
Right.
Okay.
So
And
it's not
so-
like we can use it for something else.
All right, thank you.
The way the appropriation would have worked would have been to transfer money out of the golf course to a special appropriation. So now we just won't make the transfer and the funding stays in the account.
So Melissa, do you want us to do anything about the wayfinding and the fire the fire rehab that we're not moving?
I think as long as it's reflected in the table and we have the overall vote on the table as reflected, I think then we should be fine.
Okay. So we have to have two motions, one for the 22,409,809 in revenue finance special appropriations. I will
Okay.
move that. Does anyone want to second me?
Second.
Second,
Okay, so let me go to my screen. Let me figure out how to share. So this is favorable action on warrant 8 CIP items that are revenue financed in
And I think the cemetery item would also need to be separate because that's also the same concept as the golf enterprise. It's a transfer. So
okay, so this is in the amount of 22
409 889.
Oh, I was wrong.
So Melissa, tell me I've got this right. CIP items that are revenue financed in the amount of 22,409,889.
Yep.
Okay.
And then you
Jocelyn has a
want to
question.
roll the cemetery item in there, you can add 300 to that number or vote it separately, however you want to do.
Let's add it in. Comma
Plus 300.
plus 300,000
Yes.
for cemetery. How do I describe this?
Walnut Hill Cemetery
Improvements.
improvements.
I'm gonna misspell this. Okay, we'll do the two together. Michael Berger,
Yes.
Harry Bors.
There were
Yeah.
some questions.
Sorry, Harry, I had a question.
Oh,
There-
okay, I'm gonna interrupt the vote. We'll start all over. Do your question.
Thank you. So Michael Berger's comment raised this question in my mind. I do recall that there was I think it was a $30,000 appropriation that might have been for planning or something for the lighting. Was that in the operating budget, Melissa? For the recreation department?
You think there's a line item that's supporting the lighting project within recreation?
Yes.
I would
Yes,
have to double back with Tim on that.
Okay, thank you. But it's not in the CIP. It's
No, not to my.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Harry.
Oh, that's okay. Let's start anew. Michael Berger, are you still a yes?
On the reconsideration, yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Harry Bors,
Well, if Michael is, I am. Yes.
okay. Cliff Brown,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Dennis is not here. David Mark,
Michael convinced me, yes.
okay. Neil, Neil Gordon,
Yes. I'm a yes.
Susan
I'm a
Granoff.
yes.
Thank you. Susan Granoff,
Yes.
Perry Grossman,
Yes.
Kelly Hadebeck, I don't think she's here. Lisa Jonas,
Yes.
Janice Khan,
Yes.
Brian Ladd,
Yes.
Alec Lebovitz,
Yes.
Carol Levin,
Yes.
Liz Linda. Don't think she's here.
Not here.
Pam Loesch,
Yes.
Jocelyn Murphy,
Yes.
Danelle O'Neill,
Yes.
Linda Olson Pelkey,
Yes.
Fran Perla,
Yes.
David Pollock,
Yes.
Carlos Ruduejo,
Yes.
Margaret,
Yes.
Lee Selwyn. Is Lee here? No. Chris
No.
Westfall.
Yes.
So by a vote of 22 to 0, we have approved CIP items that are revenue financed in the amount of 22,409,889 plus the cemetery amount in the amount cemetery improvements for 300,000. So vote number 2 is these are for the main motion favorable action. On WA 8, CIP. CIP items bond funded in the amount
12.7.
of 12,700,000. Is anyone planning on changing their vote? Hearing no objections.
I'm gonna wait until I hear what Michael is gonna do.
I'm leaning to same vote.
Okay, so we have approved that by 22 to 0. Save this, stop the share. Okay. Melissa, and again, I'm going to go to you. We have the operating budget and we have conditions of appropriation. Would it make sense to do operating first or?
Sure. Why don't we just jump into the budget tables and then we can jump into the Word document and then talk about conditions of appropriations after that. Does that sound good?
That sounds good.
Okay. All right.
So we'll get those up.
All right. Start at the top here.
Okay.
And I'll just make my screen a little bit bigger. So we had started talking about some of this last week. There are some changes from what I had given you last week, and I'll try and walk through some of what those are. So the first change is in revenue. Obviously, the override number doesn't change, but we talked about the adjustment that we are using additional overlay reserve money. So that's the adjustment that you see here, that 1.55. And then you see this 1.293047. This is the money that we are using to fund the CIP item. Carol, I'm not sure. Yeah, we did vote the total correct. So we're reappropriating funds from the fiscal 25 mini CIP into the current year's mini CIP and referencing the list that Carol presented earlier. And so that adjustment in revenue just shows the reappropriation of those funds. Then we'll go down and look at the override restorations. So these are the items that we had talked about last week that would be restored under the override in each of the various departments. These should all be familiar to you as you've discussed them with the departments. Obviously, most notable is the fire department, 800,000. And then we have, so a total of 1.74 for year one town restorations. The school override number is here, $4.5 million. I've highlighted the other changes that have happened as well. So we talked already about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund adjustment. That's reflected here. These are the reductions we just talked about through the CIP. This is just calling out the cemetery number here. You'll see that the golf number is no longer in this table. The additional 50 we just put in for Charlie's information. This is the new number when you take the old fiscal 25 CIP and add it to the existing 500 that we have for mini CIP. Then the other reduction that Carol talked about earlier. So these are our fiscal 27 recommended budgets in their entirety. You can see that the total town and school appropriations are 253 million. The total non-departmental is 164. So then you have a total general appropriations of 417. And then when you add your CIP to that of 22.4, you're at 439, 876. We don't vote on the non-appropriated amounts, and the grand total is 456, 68, 508.
So if one had individual operating budget changes, is the best way to do that is to go to, so for instance, I'm thinking of 2 departments, to go to those 2 departments and make the adjustments?
Yep, I'd highlight them in yellow. So we do have, right now, you do have 2 items that you had previously voted that I've called out in this column here, AC capital sub changes. So I'll relabel this full advisory when I put this in front of the board. You had already reduced the advisory committee budget by 750, and you had increased the building department budget by 310. I think at the time you were envisioning that that would be taken out of the school budget, but then when the school budget was in front of you, you chose not to do that. So you're still out of balance by 310. We had talked about the potential of state aid kind of making this up in the fall, and that we would be able to provide that to the building department then.
Okay. So my question to you is, for the building department, given the fact that the override has passed, does that have any meaningful effect on whether the 310 should continue to go to increase buildings budget and come out of the schools?
So when we appropriate additional state aid in the fall,
Okay.
the plan is to
That was
take
the
it
one
from the
where we said
school
we wanted to
allocation.
hold off till the fall.
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm putting forward, because I'm chairing this tonight, so I guess I can, is 2 changes, and I would take them in this order. Taking $31,000 from the legal budget, from their legal services line item, sending 750 of that to the advisory committee's services line item to restore that, and sending the remainder 30,250 to the reserve fund. David, Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, but not on that specifically. Do you want me to wait?
No, we're discussing changes, so.
Okay. Thank you. Melissa, can you give us an update on the attempt to restore the money for the senior center medical transport?
The override funding is present there. So you've got the 175 that's going to be going into the Council on Aging budget.
Oh, that's good news. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Linda Olsen-Pelkey.
Yeah, I would like to see, I guess I just want to make sure that the food coupons at the farmer's market has been restored.
Yep, that was restored through the GIC restoration. So you'll see that right here under Health and Human Services. So even
because it's through public health.
Yeah, even in a no override situation, that was already.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Danelle, you have a question. How much extra? I don't really
Sorry,
understand
yeah.
it.
Oh, sorry about that, Harry, but yeah, thank you. So, it was just on the news recently that the state passed, gave extra money, like they got an extra $53 million to disperse around the cities and towns in the state. I guess it was $53 million, $53 million more dollars than they had last year that they were able to give. I was just curious, how much do you think the town will get from that this year in regards to like the school town partnership?
So we have the House Ways and Means budget that's already been, and the Senate Ways and Means came out this week. So with the House Ways and Means, we saw an additional 504,000. With the Senate Ways and Means, they increased unrestricted general government aid. So we will see a boost on top of that. We're thinking it's all in all, it'll probably be somewhere around 800,000, but I always like to see the cherry sheet before I put a number out there. So I haven't seen the cherry sheet from the Senate Ways and Means because sometimes assessments can change and that might make the number a little bit lower. So,
okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Alec Lebovitz.
Hi, thanks, Harry. Given what we've heard about the additional funding for the building department, do we think it makes sense that, or do we need to take a motion to vote to rebalance that budget with the assumption that we'll come back in the fall to fund that need?
I don't think it's necessary. I think it's a commitment that the town administrator has made. And, if in November, if we made a different recommendation, you can remind us of this and make the motion to put the money where you think it should be. But that is what our plan is for the fall.
Okay, thank you.
Janice Kahn.
Yes, thanks, Harry. So Melissa, could you remind me what the 30,000 in the legal services line from the override is for?
So that was a reduction that we had made to their budget. And so this is just restoring that cut.
Okay. I just want to draw attention to the fact that whereas the medical transport was important for the senior center, and our increasingly poor seniors in this town, that there are other transportation needs as well that were highlighted in the in the report of the subcommittee. And I'm just wondering if we could add more money to transportation, for instance, having seniors, helping them get to the senior center who, have no way to get there otherwise, or, to increase accessibility.
Janice, you and I had discussed this earlier today.
I know, but we had
another.
but I've had a subsequent conversation.
Yes.
So, and I'm gonna defer my conversation. I'm gonna defer this to Susan to follow up, because Susan it was her report. So
Susan, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay, actually it was Fran's report, but I'd be happy to talk about this. One point that came throughout the responses we got from our written questions to the COA director and during our public hearing is that one of the most important needs is transportation broadly by seniors. And as was written in our report, transportation is often listed as the #1 need of Brookline seniors, especially those not able to keep up with the high cost of living in Brookline. Without subsidized transport, many seniors are not able to go not only to medical appointments, but simply to even attend the senior center or to get around town. And so there's a broad need for additional transportation funding. And in fiscal year 27, because of the ending of ARPA funding, there's a real scrambling to get enough funding to paper over some of the significant decline in funding that's causing. And in order to avoid major disruption in transportation programs for seniors. And this is not only for medical transportation, but transportation back and forth to the senior center and the various discounts that are available for ride shares. It's important to have some additional funding. And it wasn't specifically requested, but I think the feeling was that we were all going to do a non-override budget, and the new COA director wanted to be very cooperative, but it becomes very clear when you actually read comments, this is a key need. There are, of course, other key needs, such as enough social workers and food insecurity, but this is one that isn't being addressed by any other programs, and it's one that is not going to require additional salaries per se. The current transportation vehicles that are used and the drivers that are driving, all of that is funded through private funding. And there's a need to make certain that with the end of ARPA funding, there's an ability to keep the programs going, because a lot of the private funding has been pretty much exhausted at this point. So I think that having the whatever you had mentioned as left over after the $750, is it about 30,000 something?
$30,250.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it would be wonderful.
I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Janice this afternoon, which is, if we were to appropriate it for that, is the senior center in the form of its director willing to take it?
If it's not just strictly for medical transportation, if it were for transportation services, I think she's been on record as saying that that is a critical need.
Okay, thank you.
So I think that that's the significant difference.
Thank you. Elisa Jonas.
Are we right now discussing the specific proposals? For example, Harry's proposal? Is
Well, we're discussing, because what we usually do is discuss things before the motion is actually made. And so the motion will be made before we vote on the operating budget, but we're throwing ideas out there.
Right.
Given that we know a motion will be made.
Okay, so I, as Harry knows, I have a slight disagreement with him about what to do about the legal services budget. I feel that transferring 31,000 into the reserve, I understand why Harry would like to do that, which is to say, hey, look, you had this extra money, which you shouldn't have spent on, you should have sent this all to the Ethics Commission, you shouldn't have had it, we shouldn't have paid $31,000 for an investigator. I do feel that seems more like well, I would prefer to figure out a way to provide funds for the people who are now short $24,000 in their legal fees. So if there was a choice between $31,000 going into the reserve versus taking $24,000 from the legal budget and transferring it to the settlement fund, and making clear that the reason we're doing that is for the purpose of reimbursing the out-of-pocket costs for the people who were who had to incur these funds, I would prefer to take that approach. I know that Harry's reason for putting it into putting the 31,000 into the reserve is that they will then be short 31,000 and then have to come to us for reserve fund funding request, but that will not happen until the end of the year. It's not clear how that'll all turn out. Will they even need reserve fund transfers? And I guess I would prefer to be more practical in how to deal with this issue, and I realize that we can't force anyone to use those funds to pay the costs that that the not the claimants that the people who were investigated incurred, but it would send, I feel that would send a better signal than the 31,000 to the reserve fund, because I feel I just feel more comfortable doing it that way. So I don't know whether I should propose a different option, or whether how other people feel about it.
Okay, we will move on to those other people. Carlos.
Thank you, Harry. As many of you, or at least 2,000 people watched last night's election result on Big, which was great because it was actually had on-site interviews from the winners of the select board. So Melissa, I have a question for you. Of the 5% franchise fee, cable franchise fee, the town gets 3%. What's the dollar amount for that 3%?
Give me a minute. Hold on.
Thank you. And while Melissa looks at this, this franchise fee, cable fee is supposed to be, it's collected by the cable companies, and it's supposed to be used for local cable companies or local cable programs and programming, like, for example, what Big provides.
So we have $400,000 budgeted in fiscal 27. And we have a home rule petition that allows us to use it as a local receipt.
Yes, so we're getting $400,000. That's the 3%.
That's the estimate for how much we'll receive in fiscal 27.
Okay, so another percent. If Big were to get another percent, it would be about 150,000.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of the issue is that this is a declining funding source. So, it's going to eventually go away as well. So,
right, which also, since it's declining for both sides, for Big too. So the amount that Big is getting from this source is also declining year per year, and that's one of the big sources that they use to provide the services for the town. So one last question: what's the status of the MOU with Big? It's supposed to be agreed by the end of this month.
Yep. So I know Charlie has been working on it. He is taking a well-deserved vacation for the next 2 weeks, but our intent is to have it done so that it's ready in time for the expiration of the old agreement.
Okay, so if we were to move 1 more % over to Big, do you have any suggestions of where that would come from?
Well, if it's local receipt, it would flow through the town school split. So the schools would take 60% of that reduction and the town would take 40% of that reduction. So we would probably need a recommendation as to what budgets you would like to reduce.
Okay. I'll just say, and I guess we have in November too, but I'll just say that Big had to reduce its staffing due to the lack of funding from the town, from that percentage, that franchise fee, and it provides a lot of the services at either free or very reduced price. Like, for example, last night's election coverage, or this weekend's Asian. I don't remember the rest of the numbers, but the Asian celebration that is happening tonight. So I think we should keep this in our minds, that that franchise fees should go more towards what it's supposed to be for, like other towns have done.
Yeah, I would just say that Charlie is making a lot of progress with Jessica on the details of the MOA. And I think one of the things the town is very interested in is understanding the way that the funds are currently being spent And then that way, you know, when they are asking for additional money, you know, we have more certainty about what the use is going to be for.
Yes, I'll just, Harry, if you allow me for one more comment, I'll just say that we're very lucky with the staff that Big has for last night's production of the TV show. There's one employee who actually spent over $500 of his own pocket to be able to make the program work by either renting things that he has paid on his own out of his own pocket, or by loaning equipment, crucial equipment for the production of the show that has come out of his own pocket and it's on loan to Big. So we're very lucky who we have there, because I've never seen people that get paid so little and yet provide out of their own pocket so much money for things to actually happen. I was involved last night in helping Tommy with his program, and I was floored to see the generosity that is coming out of those employees. So thank you.
Thank you. Carol Levin.
Yeah, the table that you had up before, Melissa, if I was understanding it correctly, was showing that post override changes. And I thought I recall that there was going to be an additional $150,000 from the override for the public buildings. And I didn't see that, unless I'm reading it incorrectly.
So I think that there is probably a timing issue of what phase, you know, what year of the override some of these things are rolling in. I know one of the things that Chaz is going to be working on for the select board narrative is to provide kind of each year of the override so that you can see when things are coming in. I know there was a question earlier about the police positions. Those are going to be phased in to a year. And so I think that's probably where you'll see it's on the list. It's part of the 5.3. It's just a question of timing.
Okay, and I guess I'm not clear as to if Chaz's intent is to have the 310 become part of the town's base building division budget and just let the schools not ever pay for it.
I think that the intent is that before we apply the formula to what's available in state aid, that the 310 would be covered first.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Christine Westfall.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on Harry's proposed motion to move money out of the budget for services in the legal department. And you know, I think that's a statement that we might want to make. I don't think that putting that in the fund that Elisa Jonas wanted to put it into will be effective, because it's very clear that they don't want to spend the money that way at this time. I think it'd be much more useful to go into transportation for the senior center.
Thank you. Fran Perler.
Yeah, so just historically, I'd like to mention that the senior center, with the loss of ARPA funding and the TNC going to the teen senior co-op pilot, has lost about $400,000 or $500,000 in transportation. So any amount that could go back for any transportation would be greatly appreciated and highly useful. For example, the $10 means tested Uber coupons are limited. Many of the transportation services that are provided to help the poorest of the seniors are limited in numbers. And there's also the aspect of bringing seniors from South Brookline, from other places, to the senior center, because as everyone knows, Unless you want to borrow my driveway, it's impossible to park near the senior center. And so these bus transportation systems are really essential for allowing seniors to prevent them from becoming isolated, allowing them to use all the services. And, you know, I too would like to give the Casella 5 their 24K. I'm not sure how to do that. And I hope with Anthony, a new select board member, that some of the tension might be reduced. But I would just like to give my 2 cents that whatever transportation aspect in the senior center that AC can add to would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Elisa Jonas.
I forgot to mention, if we were to send the 24,000 to the settlement fund, it would be conditional on those funds being used to reimburse the people who were investigated. And if it isn't used for that purpose, it would go to free cash. But I do have 2 second thoughts, which is, it is true that we have a new select board, as Fran just mentioned, and perhaps it would be better to first determine whether there might be a change of heart at that point.
That's not happening, Elisa, in that we are voting on the budget tonight.
Right, I know, but
we can always change our vote later on, but we will be voting something tonight.
right. Oh, I'm not saying we wouldn't be voting, but possibly if by putting the money into the reserve, I feel like, is that something that's going to really help anyone? I mean, it seems like retribution. So if anything, why not propose to have that money go for the senior transportation and not to the reserve fund? Because I think making some kind of assumption that if the money's in the reserve fund, somehow they're going to get $24,000 for all the people who are short on money for having to dealt with this investigation, being found innocent. I would like to see it at least go to senior transportation. So maybe I'll propose that.
Thank you. So I am going to make a motion that the legal services budget be reduced by 31,000 and the full 31,000 go to the Council on Aging for senior transportation services. This would mean we don't restore advisory's budget by 750. It does go to something that people, I think, pretty universally agreed would be a good use. And again, just speaking on this, my original take was that whether you think the Casella 5 should have been investigated or not, there was the option to investigate by the state. We've been through this before, but I will just reiterate. An ethics complaint by whoever filed the original complaint could have been filed with the state. The state would then have done their investigation. The town would not have spent 31,000 on an investigation on its own. The town would have spent 0. And so that's why I have chosen the $31,000 figure. I think there can be reasonable grounds from people as to where it goes, but I am willing to have, at least in the motion, that it goes to senior transportation services via the Council on Aging. Harry Bors.
So a moment ago when you brought this up, my impression was that you were doing this as a way to take money that may be needed for legal services, in essence, quarantine it within the reserve fund, so it would necessitate a discussion and a demonstration of need. If we send all of this as a package over to the Council on Aging for transportation,
we no longer have that ability, nor do they have access at all.
So that would be an argument for amending the motion if one wished to retain those kind of options. Perry Grossman.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering if town council could briefly comment on the motion to move the 31K from legal services, in particular, addressing the issue of being able to do the investigation for free at the state level, because I thought town council previously gave some rationale for why it would not be best done at the state level. Thanks.
Joe?
So I would be opposed to reducing the town council budget, but to answer Perry's question, I would have not also recommended it go to the state for two different reasons. One is that's not the only allegation of something being violated, state ethics law. There's also allegations that have violated Office of Campaign and Political Finance law, and also town policies. So if you're going to segment it out and say this should have been handled by ethics, that would have only been a piece of the pie. I would also disagree with it being good legal advice to say it should have been investigated by the State Ethics Commission, because here it was investigated. There was a finding of a conflict of interest, and then nothing happened. If the State Ethics Commission found a violation of state ethics law, it is unlikely that nothing would have happened. At least there would probably have been a public education letter. That's to the recipient. So that's to the town meeting member who had been involved, or it could have been public, as in like a press release from the state. So where it was investigated by the town, you weren't breaking up the investigation into little pieces, and you had control at the conclusion, as opposed to leaving it to Beacon Hill to decide what happens to violators.
Thank you. Neil Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. So on this particular decision, an independent investigation, whoever does it, I think, and I go back to 2 meetings of the advisory committee, I think that it's fair to distinguish between needing someone independent to find facts and someone determining whether a complaint is actually a violation of the law. And as we've said many times, the notion that a campaign finance violation without a campaign is just black and white, it's been pointed out, not the law, right? You can't have it without a campaign. It is not the law, and that doesn't require an independent investigation by the state, by an independent attorney, by a conflicted attorney, or anybody else, right? And that is part of the problem. The problem is that this whole part and parcel of this particular situation just needed to be investigated when the law part could have been solved by the law firm on the 6th floor. And that is the ongoing frustration, right? That suggests to us that there is just an excess of funding that was irresponsibly spent, and therefore it doesn't need to be in an ongoing budget.
Thank you. Any more comments before we go to a motion?
I'd like to hear Joe's response to that comment.
Thank you. Joe?
So in response to Neil's kind of scenario that the OCPF part of it was so obvious it could have been decided, I disagree with, but I won't fight the hypo. But in that case, the idea, what I understand is this, what should have happened based on this hypothetical is the ethics violation go to the state. Town council's office decide there's no OCPF investigation. But then there's a third part about who then is going to decide whether there are any violations of town policy. So that's what I'm saying about like having an independent investigator, and she was not conflicted. I can get into that, but absolutely not conflicted. She was independent. Handle all of the allegations is best practice, as opposed to slice off part of it here, slice off part of it there, and slice off part of it to a third. You wouldn't want three people finding facts that are central to the allegations, because you might have three different conclusions or two different conclusions or slight different, disagreements. So you want one fact finder handling all of the allegations.
Thank you. Chris Westfall.
Joe, I want to be honest with you here. I read the 19-page report. Basically, she went through all of the possible violations and found they didn't apply. That's something your office should have been able to do. And I don't want to have a big argument about that, but the crux of our argument with you right here is this was just a stupid use of funds. At the absolute most, it was a $400 cost to the town that ended up costing us $31,000 in investigation. That's what we're angry about. And I don't think your office did a very good job. But, clearly you disagree with that. So we'll just deal with this in terms of the motion.
Thank you. Other comments? Cliff.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little troubled that, this is a situation where you had 5 people and you had, I think, tension because they were different parts of the government on opposite sides of a question. And it's sort of like a rock and a hard place for everyone involved. And it strikes me that it's pretty easy to look back and say, and that this was a waste of time and money, that we shouldn't have done this. I think it's very difficult for the people on this committee to be objective as it relates to the individuals involved because they were our colleagues. I think it's really, really difficult. I think it's also kind of facile to basically say, well, there was this money, it was used, it's clear proof that they don't need that money because it was used. You don't know what the next year is going to be. And you can't say, well, gee, you got to come back to us every time. Because we've said, well, you shouldn't have had this $31,000, so we're never going to give it to you again. That's essentially the spirit of what's being said here. I just don't get it. I really don't. I think we're conflicted. I think it was a problem that needed to be looked at. I think that if they had done it internally and we didn't like what they found, we would have objected. It's sort of like what the school committee did with the CLA report. And the school committee basically said, hey, we think that our staff has done what CLA wanted them to do. Well, we didn't agree with that. And so we wanted them to go back to CLA, spend money to make sure that what CLA said needed to be done was done. Sometimes you just need to go outside in order to have the perception of dispassionate analysis. And I think this is one of those situations because you had 2 different sides of the government, working against each other. Thank you.
So I'm going to comment before I go to Neil, because there was in Cliff's comments, I think, at least an inference that, looking back is sort of hindsight's 20/20 and it needed to be investigated and everything. I will remind people of the email chain that the town administrator added to the agenda package when we met with him 10 days ago. That email chain was from a year ago, and it involved Dennis and me and the town administrator. Dennis and I went to the town administrator when this whole thing started, before the investigator was hired, before it blew up. And we said, this is a nothing burger. This is stupid. This is a bunch of people taking a photograph of some sanitation workers and a sanitation truck. And you have the discretion to say that this is nothing and we're going no further on this. And he did not take our advice. He said he had no discretion. He had to launch an investigation. He had to launch an investigation because it was a town policy, which, as we have pointed out since, is a town policy of the select board that does not apply to town meeting members, does not apply to members of the advisory committee. This could have been halted on day one, and the town chose, after thinking about it, they chose not to do so. This was nothing. This was a waste of time. It was a waste of money, and it put the Casella Five into a position that Chaz himself described as when he said his family felt threatened because they were threatening to sue him. If anybody sued him, he's indemnified. He may have to go through the worry and everything else, but he's indemnified. These people weren't indemnified, and they were charged with a plethora of charges that shifted over time, but that included a felony charge in which they then had to, if they had any kind of decent legal sense, they had to lawyer up, and they did. And for us not to say that this is just wrong, because it is, it's just wrong. And it was a stupid, stupid decision made that shows a total lack of judgment. And even the town administrator said in hindsight, if he had to do it over again, he would not have done it. That's what he said at our meeting when we last met with him. There's nothing in this taking away the $31,000 from legal's budget that says that goes on ad infinitum. It can be restored next year. If they need more for legal services, they can come and ask for a reserve fund transfer. There's still money in their budget for legal services. We're not bringing the budget down to zero. But for us not to stand up and say something and do this simple act, I think is frankly disgraceful if that's the way we eventually choose to go. Neil, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. I rest your case.
So I am moving that $31,000 be cut from the legal services budget and sent to the COA for senior transportation services. Is there a second?
Second.
And I would like to amend that to send it to the reserve fund.
Already, is there a second for that? I will second that if nobody else does. Any more comments before we vote on the board's amendment and then on the overall reduction? Seeing none, I'm going to go to my screen.
Sorry, Harry, can you have Harry explain his rationale?
Absolutely. Harry, would you?
Thanks.
Sure. It goes back to, I think, what the other Harry originally had voiced, although I will confess, maybe I misunderstood, which was to ensure that that money, if in essence sequestered in the reserve fund, would mean that should town council's office need it for some sort of outside counsel or, do some sort of whatever that needed to be done, that before that could be spent or released, they would have to come to us, have that conversation, and demonstrate the need for it, and that would give some control over it.
Whereas if it goes directly to another department, there will not be an option for that. It simply won't be there should it be needed, nor will we have the control over it.
I cannot see the chat. So David Mark, could you take over the chat functions if people have questions?
I have a question. This is Elise.
Yep.
So, in which way does it seem less retaliatory for our body to then take funds from the legal department and either give it to the senior center or put it in the reserve fund? Which way seems less retaliatory? Is it the reserve fund, because then the legal department can then try to access that if needed?
So I think the answer to your question is going to depend upon who you ask. If you're asking Elisa Jonas, she's in full agreement with you. If you ask me, I don't think there's an answer to your question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just grappling with the optics of this for us as a body, advisory committee. I'm in full agreement that we should not, that I do not think that this investigation should have gone through, and I absolutely support a lot of the comments that have been shared. But like Cliff said, these are also our peers, and so we are not, what's the word I'm looking for?
So Elise, let me make a suggestion. Let's go through the list of comments.
Okay.
And if you want to then say something at the end, I will call on you.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, Thank you, Harry. To Harry Boy's comment, the remaining balance in the reserve fund remains under our control and can be released for exactly the same purpose. Should the need arise for a qualified transfer. And in fact, we believe that the remaining legal services budget would be adequate. If it proves not to be adequate for good reason, that would be unanticipated and we can tap into the reserve fund. I'm not sure that this particular amount is going to be the critical amount, plus or minus. And this amount, even if it went into the reserve fund, would not be earmarked. It would just become part and parcel of the reserve fund. A very quick comment about retaliation. We have fiscal oversight. We are the advisory committee. We are the finance committee. If we consider any department having engaged in, pardon the expression, frivolous spending in one fiscal year, I think we're obligated to tighten that belt, pardon that expression too, in the following fiscal year. That's not retaliation. That's called prudent fiscal management.
Thank you. Janice Kahn.
Thank you, Harry. So I want to frame this a little differently. So I asked Melissa about the 30,000 that is going to the legal department that was in the override. I would bet any amount of money, $23.25 million, that zero voters cared about $30,000 going to the legal department. I don't think that was on any voter's mind. And so frankly, I was, I would love that $30,000 to go to senior transport. I know that the way overrides are structured, that the way it's in the override is the way typically it has to be spent the first year. So, I don't know, Melissa can shake her head yes or no, but certainly for years 2 and 3, I would hope that that $30,000 goes to the senior center for transportation. And I'll explain why. Unfortunately, most of the ARPA money was used, or I wouldn't say most, much of the ARPA money was used to shore up a safety net in this town. That's what it was used for. And with the funding gone, it shreds our safety net. So, and there is nothing in our budget to shore up the safety net in the way that ARPA was able to do it. You know, we do our little bits here and there, we do, but fundamentally, we now have huge parts of our population that are very vulnerable because we just are not spending our money in a way that reweaves our safety net. And I hope that this is a conversation that we take into future years, because I would like us all to feel whole. And I fear that the opposite is actually happening in Brookline. So yeah, I would like that $30,000 from legal to go to the senior transportation, because that is a real need. And we do need to start to think about the 20-something% of the population in this town that is now very underfunded in this town. You know, one of the lowest funded departments in the town, and one of increasing, as we age, an increasingly needy part of our population. So yeah, so I am totally in favor of, you know, whether it's the 31,000 or 30,000, whatever it is, it needs to go to shore up a little bit of the safety net that's been very much depleted for seniors in this town.
Thank you. Michael Berger.
Thank you, Harry. I applaud Janice's comments and reasoning for that. But in terms of optics, it appears that it's kind of a two-step. And if I were coming from outside of the advisory committee and not privy to our conversations, I might be surprised about the transfer. It's very clear because it's two actions. One is to remove the money, and that talks to the actions that were taken against the few, and then there's the other, which is to Janice's point, where the money should go, and so it's a little confusing. So I would support Harry's motion because it's very clear then what the change in the budget is for, and it doesn't get conflated with another laudable goal and a needed one. Thank you.
And you're referring to Harry Borz's motion?
I am, Harry Borz.
Yes, just wanted to make that clear. Thank you. David Mark.
Yeah, there are two Harry motions. I would like to just reiterate what other people have said. Neil is right in that we have more money in the reserve fund should they need it. I really appreciate Elisa's comment. The optics are very important. That's a key word, the optics here. If we put it in the reserve fund, it's going to make it look like we're holding it hostage out of a desire for revenge. We already know that the investigation was, a retaliatory type of revenge operation to begin with, and I don't think we should do tit for tat. If we ask the question, however, what is the best use of that money? And clearly that would be the senior center, transportation for vulnerable seniors who need it, then we can make an argument about putting it there instead of the reserve fund. So I would urge we do that, because that makes so much more sense from an optics point of view, from a best use point of view, and it doesn't look petty on our part. The pettiness is on their side. Let's leave it there.
Thank you. Elise, you wrote in a comment, we're not impartial. I would point out that in this entire history, nobody is impartial. Certainly the town administrator and town council were not impartial. Whoever made the complaint was not impartial. The decision by the town administrator to go forward with this was not an impartial decision. We are not impartial because we know the people involved. If it gets to a town meeting vote, many of them are not impartial because they know the people involved. So if you're looking for the person who, in the end of all this, lives in the cave, who has no idea of what's going on in the world, you're not going to find that person.
Oh, I'm not looking for that person. I think, I think David Mark really described what I was thinking a lot better, which is if we were to frame this discussion more about what is the best use for the money rather than using his words, holding it hostage or making it look like that. That's really what my question was, is like,
Okay.
and because I haven't done this before, I didn't quite have the right language. So thank you, David, for helping me put better language to that.
Okay.
But you had the right perspective.
Right.
Yes.
Harry,
Thank
can I
you.
just point out one thing?
Sure.
It is not our job to be impartial. Conflicts of interest are different. It is not our job to be impartial.
Thank you.
Okay, then we have a conflict of interest. Either way, this body has a conflict of interest with how we choose to move this money. That's all I wanted to point out. And I wanted to point out, do we as a body want to actively make a choice that may look like, whether we are or not, that's something else. But if it looks like we're holding it hostage or being retaliatory, that will have its own effect.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go to a vote on Harry Bors's amendment. And let me share my screen. So the Boers amendment is to, if legal services budget is reduced by 31K, the money goes to the reserve fund. So if we decide to move 31K out of legal and you think the money should go to the reserve fund, vote yes on this. Michael Berger.
Yes, I've been convinced by the comments of Janice and David Mark, so I'm going to say no to this.
Thank you. Harry Bors.
Well, I may have been convinced by their comments too, but I feel since it's my amendment, I should vote yes. So I'll say yes.
Okay. Cliff.
I will abstain, Harry. I know you love that.
In fact, I'm not surprised. Elise.
No.
David Mark.
I usually vote the same way as Harry Bors, but I'll say no this time.
Neil.
This is feeling like Michael Sandman deja vu. I'm going to vote no.
Susan Granoff.
No.
Perry Grossman.
I'm going to abstain.
Elisa Jonas.
No.
Janice Kahn.
No.
Brian Ladd.
Well, I agreed with Michael number one, so I'm going to say yes.
Yes, okay. Alec Lebovitz.
Abstain.
Carol Levin.
Abstain.
Pam Lodish.
Abstain.
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. Jocelyn Murphy.
Abstain.
Danelle O'Neill.
Seller 5 abstention. I abstain.
Linda Olson Pelkey.
No.
Fran Perler.
So I'm voting no, because if you're taking 31K out, anybody can form their own way of saying it's retaliation, no matter what you're going to use it for. So go seniors.
Thank you. David Pollock,
Abstain.
No.
Carlos Ruduejo,
No.
Margaret Robotham.
No.
I'm sorry, I can't hear Margaret.
Oh, sorry, no.
No, thank you. Chris Westfall.
No.
Okay, so the Boers amendment fails by a vote of 2 to 13 to 7. So the main motion is to strike 31,000 from the legal department general consulting services line item and move it to transportation services of the Council on Aging. Michael Berger,
Yes.
Harry Boers,
Abstain.
Cliff Brown,
Abstain.
Elise,
Can you come back to me?
sure. David Mark,
Ironically, because of where you're putting it, I have to abstain because I have a conflict of interest.
oh, I'm sorry.
You created the conflict of interest, Harry. So I have to abstain.
Neil Gordon,
Yes.
Susan Granoff,
Yes.
Harry Grossman,
Well, I find this whole situation very frustrating and unfortunate, and I don't see a good solution all around. I'm hoping maybe we can do something to help the people that were faced charges or, had to pay for legal fees in this, like maybe a GoFundMe or something, some other solution to help them. But I don't see taking money from the legal services, so I'm going to say no.
okay. Elisa Jonas,
Perry kind of said what I was thinking. Come back to me. I'd love to give seniors more money.
Janice Kahn,
Yes, I just want to point out that they're getting 30,000 from the override. Yes.
Brian Ladd,
Yes.
Alec Lebovitz,
Though I'm very supportive of increasing funding for the Council on Aging, I abstain.
Carol Levin,
Abstain.
where am I? Pam Lodish,
Abstain.
Jocelyn Murphy,
I also support the Council on Aging, but I abstain.
Danelle O'Neill,
Not allowed to say yes, so I abstain.
Linda Olson Pelkey.
I'm joyously voting yes.
Thank you. Fran Perler,
Come back to me, please.
David Pollock,
Abstain.
Carlos Ruejo. Carlos,
Yes.
thank you. Margaret,
Yes.
Christine.
Yes.
So we'll go back to the others. See what we have here. Elise, I believe you're the first of the come back to me's.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Dennis, Harry, Liz is not here.
Elisa.
Elisa.
Elisa, okay.
Well, to give more money to the seniors, I'll say yes.
Thank you. And Fran,
As much as I'd like to say yes, I believe I have to abstain because I'm a member of the Council on Aging. So that was an abstain,
Okay,
Harry.
and I'm gonna vote. Sorry. Right, I put abstain.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that.
Okay. I'm voting yes. So by a vote of 12 to 1 to 10, we are striking 31,000 from the legal budget and sending it to the COA. Stop sharing. So, Melissa, do we go to conditions of appropriation or do we go to an overall budget vote?
Why don't we wrap up the numbers since we're done? And then we can talk about conditions of appropriation. Does that sound good?
That's fine. So, are you able to provide me a number?
Yep. So, hold on, I'm gonna refresh my
Or is this
computer has
the,
fallen asleep. So hold on.
I don't think I wrote anything down.
Yep. Laptop working again.
Let me actually go to this. So this is this is, would one describe this as an omnibus budget vote?
Sure. So total appropriated expenses are 439,876,474.
Let me just
Yep.
write the number or the thing. So favorable action on WA 8 omnibus budget in the amount of the number again, please.
439
439
876
876
474.
474. Favorable action on warrant article 8 omnibus budget in the amount of 439,876,474. And is there a question? I thought the chat said something. Hold on.
That was
No.
that's for me.
Oh. The Gordon condition of appropriation is being moved, but as Melissa and I just said, we're going to do that next. But
Okay, I'm sorry.
we're doing this.
I'm sorry.
Doing
I missed-
numbers first, then language.
So let me share the screen again. Hold on. Bear with me. Michael Berger.
Noting that almost $500 million, take a deep breath. I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Apples.
Well, $500 million here, $500 million there, it adds up to real money. Yes.
Cliff Brown.
Yes.
Elise Couture-Stone.
Yes.
David Mark Goldstein.
Voting yes makes me nauseous, but yes.
Neil Gordon.
Yep, per advisory committee members, not that much. I vote yes.
Susan Granoff.
Yes.
Harry Grossman.
Yes.
Okay, Elisa Jonas,
Yes.
Janice Khan,
Yes.
Brian Ladd,
Yes.
Alec Lebovitz,
Yes.
Carol Levin,
Yes.
Pam Lodish,
Yes.
Jocelyn Murphy,
Yes.
Danelle O'Neill,
Yes.
Linda Olson Pelkey,
Yes.
Fran Perler,
Yes.
sorry, David Pollock,
Yes.
Carlos Riduejo,
Yes.
Margaret Robotham,
Yes.
and Christine Westfall.
Yes.
So by a vote of 22 to 0, we have approved the budget. We will now move on to a proposed condition of appropriation. Actually, Melissa.
Yes,
you
I have a
want-
Word
yeah,
document to run through.
Yeah,
So I have the conditions of appropriation that are traditionally voted on by advisory committee. And then I also have highlighted some areas where there's some additional language has been added. What I would recommend is kind of taking that in one chunk, and then we can talk about the additional proposals that might be on the table from Neil. And I don't know if there's anything else that's kind of come in.
okay, that sounds good.
Okay. So this is essentially the first part of the budget vote, which essentially prescribes when money can be moved and who you need to visit when you need to move money around. So these are usually appropriation transfers, and then sometimes we have to visit advisory committee depending on where the money is flowing in and out of. Section 2 just provides the authority for the chief procurement officer for entering into contracts and leases. Section 3, we've talked about the salary adjustments of the personal services reserve, and this authorizes the comptroller to make those transfers during the year. Item 4 is for stipends and salaries of elected officials, in particular the town clerk, and then I'm sure that you're all familiar with the select board stipends, given the conversations on the warrant article this year. Then our item 5 requires that any benefit eligible position go to the select board for approval prior to being filled. Then we have our golf enterprise budget, our water and sewer enterprise budget, our revolving funds, and I did remember to add the newest one, which was the health department. We almost forgot that last year. Then we have the schoolhouse maintenance and repair. So, this was a question mark before we had talked about the 310 for building. So I just had that highlighted there. So that is the original recommendation for repair maintenance. Snow and ice requires a separate vote as well. Then we have the transfers that come from the cemetery trust to support the public works department. And then the recreation revolving fund, that's reimbursement for benefits from the revolving fund. We no longer have HCA funds, but we do have opioid funds. So we're looking at $439,000 for that. I provide quarterly reports to the advisory committee. That's item 13. And then we have, is there a question?
No, there will be, but it was just me coughing.
Okay, yep, sorry. Then we have our
I had a
special,
question.
sure.
Yeah, we're going to get to questions. When Melissa goes through this first part, then we'll hit all the questions.
Okay. Then we have our special appropriations. I highlighted, these will be gone because we just voted to remove them. Then we have, let's see, any other special appropriation language. We have the funding for the sales of lots. So this language here just provides that this is how the transfer would be made. Any contracts over 100, that's standard language as well. Then we have our solar appropriation item. Carol, do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, this is addressing a concern that Carlos raised, that the phase 2 of these funds, where it's not as well-defined a program as phase 1, was concerned that that the funds not be spent primarily on consulting services to figure out how to spend the funds. So we've put in with the agreement of the sustainability director, a 10% cap on outside consulting fees.
This would be gone because you voted to eliminate that. So that's the golf course. That this number here is now 2,950 based on your earlier vote. And then this is the mini CIP funding, and this just shows how we are reappropriating $1.3 million from the prior appropriation to support the $1.793 million. And then this highlight here is just to indicate
That's
the
not
reduced-
right. You were going to make that condition of appropriation is supposed to be limited to those two leases.
No, this is the mini CIP. Oh, you
No,
want
the next one,
in this
classroom
one.
capacity.
Do you have language for me, Carol? Because I forgot that you wanted that in there as well.
It was just going to be expended for the limited, to the use for the Temple Ohabai Shalom and Temple Emeth.
I'm going to need help with spelling.
EM Ohabai, OHABEI. EI.
I'm sorry.
I think that's right. Shalom, SHALOM. And Temple needs to be
Yep, I know.
capitalized. And EMETH, yeah.
Okay.
School for the so it should get rid of the various schools. Lease payments, rent limited to rental payments under the Temple Ohabai Shalom and Temple Emeth leases. I think that works.
Melissa?
Yep.
There was a request that at the end of all this, we can get a PDF of the updated version of the proposed budget as voted by AC
I'm
tonight.
going to email all of this to you when I'm done.
Thank you. And Linda Olson-Pelkey.
Yeah, I just had a question going back to the beginning of these conditions of appropriation, which I haven't studied or anything like that, but we're talking about how to use and move funds. And I'm just wondering, this special fund that we set up to hold the override funds, is that dealt with in those conditions?
Nope, because you wouldn't be able to move money without a town meeting vote. So in order to move money out of the stabilization fund, we would need town meeting. This is just to move funds within departments. So we have our account groupings for departments. We have personnel, services, supplies, other. So if departments want to move money within their existing budget, they would need to go to the select board in order to do a lot of those transfers. We couldn't move budgets, between departments. We would need town meeting for that. So this is just for rules for spending within existing departmental budgets.
So it'll actually be spelled out to town meeting that this is what they're voting on. They're moving these override funds into the operating budget or
When we're ready
whatever.
to appropriate, we would be moving it from the stabilization fund into departmental budgets.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Melissa, I also wanted to change to the school building maintenance program.
Okay.
Where are we here?
Let's see.
It was at the beginning, not the mini CIP, but the whatever it is, the $9 million.
Yep.
Schoolhouse maintenance and repair. The listing of work to be accomplished shall be established by the school department. If the minimum, strike that. At the best, replace it with the building commissioner or the director of public buildings. Once they've given the money, they we're trying to keep them out of micromanaging Charlie's work.
So I think I was almost done at the end of the special appropriations. I would just say that I still need to run the bond financed language by bond counsel. So that potentially could change. And then we have the uses of free cash, which changed based on the descriptions that I had earlier. So those are your standard conditions of appropriation. And we can take questions about any of the new language or any other questions that you might have.
I'm assuming that we can vote in favor, subject to bond counsel's approval, and
yes,
if they don't approve, we'll revote later.
They'll just revise it, and as long as subject to any corrections made by bond counsel.
Okay. So how do we do this? Should we vote on all of those, or should we discuss other possible conditions of appropriation?
Why don't we discuss these and then have amendments that we vote on before we vote on the full slate of conditions of appropriation?
Dennis, would you like to take over?
No, but
I'm more than
sure.
happy.
Sure.
I'm more than happy to do it.
Yeah, I'm a little lost contextually, but I think we can take this. Yes, I would take questions on any of these conditions, and then I think we would just take it like a normal set of amendments before we
Okay, so
vote on the conditions.
put your name in the chat and I will call on you.
I was hoping to see a
Jocelyn
peaceful
Murphy.
transition of power.
Jocelyn.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Melissa, you went really quickly over the Gulf Enterprise. Can you go back to what that says? I looked in the budget book, and apparently there's a 350,000. I think this is what Michael Berger might have been talking about. There's a 350 capital expenditure, and we've taken the 300,000 out, but I don't know what the 50 is for. So could you go back to the enterprise fund?
Yep, I'm just scrolling right now. So hold on.
I have it in my head that it was for planning for the lighting, the services associated with the installation of lighting. I don't know that it's there. If you look in the budget book, there's an expenditure, a capital expenditure of under golf course improvements. Capital $350,000. Do you know what the
So they had they had two different uses contemplated for their capital budget. They had money going to support the lighting project, and then I think they had additional coursework. But I can clarify that with Tim. If we need to revisit this, we still have time before town meeting, but I can make sure that with what this funding is in here, that there's nothing related to the lighting project, just to be sure.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it?
That is it.
All right. So I know there's there was one proposed amendment to the conditions of appropriation. Were there any from Neil? Were there others? Not hearing that, then I think it would be worth having Neil explain what he's proposed.
Thank you, and bear with my preface for a minute. And so we spend a lot of time talking about how to encourage folks to get more involved in town government. We've got a pending warrant article, not for the first time, to explore increasing stipends for select board, creating a stipend for school committee members, We've talked about how we encourage town meeting members to run, perhaps by providing childcare services or the like. I won't go through the whole list. It's how can we better encourage? It's hard enough to reach out, run for office, come up with a public position, and in a competitive race, as we've seen, be subject to, you know, rough and tumble campaigns. That's just a way of life. Rough and tumble campaigns can be fair. They cannot be, they can be based on policy. You can't escape from that. But we're dealing with something in addition to that, and that is, contrary to public policy, the risk that you might be putting personal funds and your family's welfare at risk because you get involved in your municipal government. And I'll cite several examples, not all of which would be cured by this particular proposal. But they're all examples of being involved and finding that there is actually risk and cost associated to being involved. I'll start with the Stanley Spiegel case, which was an outside case. Stanley Spiegel, a town meeting member and long-term advisory committee member, as such, makes a comment at town hall, at or about the select board hearing room. And the next thing he knows is he's involved in a federal lawsuit. Inexpensive in terms of legal fees, federal lawsuit. And Stanley Spiegel, a member of the legislature, seeks indemnification from the executive and ends up in a long, drawn-out, additionally expensive and emotionally wrought. Not only did he have the federal lawsuit, but now he's got a conflict, not of interest, just a conflict with the executive in order to get indemnification. That's a one. I personally was named in a complaint by a member of the CDICR, appointed by the select board, an executive branch commissioner. And the nature of that complaint was based on remarks that I made. I'm a town meeting member and an advisory committee member. I made some remarks to CDICR. I made similar remarks to the select board. And if not the next thing, almost the next thing I know is I'm named in a civil rights complaint. 2 members of the school committee, equally named. And that's brought on the outside. And there was an independent investigation, and I didn't have to go out of pocket, but I was named. What we find out when we talk about the Casella case, the Casella 5 so-called, is that I don't think we need to rehash that any further. But as described, a relatively minor incident, gather at the DPW, take a picture, have somebody, a DPW employee there, as was described as a nothing burger. We now have people who receive a letter saying they're being investigated for a felony, and they're out of pocket, and the town won't reimburse them, and we know what that conflict is about. As we discuss that conflict, out of the woodwork comes David Luscaye, former advisory committee member, who says, yeah, me too, because I dared bring an amendment to a warrant article. There was a complaint, and I was investigated. I suspect those aren't the only ones. And so, as Harry Friedman said quite a while ago, we have limited leverage. But the levers we have are the levers that we need to pull. And I said this in my explanation of the condition of appropriation. Brookline's town government is separated into distinct branches. This separation appropriately prevents the concentration of power, and with each branch having unique limited powers, hinders one branch and in particularly the executive branch, from dominating others. And the proposed condition of appropriation underscores that separation. And I think it's an important separation for the reasons that I've articulated. Here we had, in the case of our town meeting colleagues and our advisory committee colleagues, a decision made by the staff. Town administrator decided, solely decided, not the select board, the town administrator decided to launch an investigation against members of the legislature. And I say, in the dark, without public disclosure, and it is wrought with risk and wrought with conflict. And so I propose that without limiting what authority the select board might have, and I think we question the authority of the executive to investigate members of the legislature, or in fact, anybody who's not a part of the executive. A half a dozen times I asked for a citation for what legal authority the select board had to investigate members of the legislature, and I've received no answer and I've received no citation, right? Notwithstanding the promise that I would receive that citation. I haven't gotten it, and so I'll conclude that maybe there is no authority. And so I don't concede that there is authority, but I propose this condition of appropriation. The language of which, let me explain first, and I'll go to the language in a sec. What I am saying is that there is an extra layer of disclosure that ought to take place before the executive investigates any member of a branch that is not the executive. And that's a list that includes the moderator, town meeting member, members of the advisory committee, members of CTO&S, any member of a moderator appointed member of a town body, typically a moderator's committee, the town clerk, members of the school committee, library trustees, or constables. That's everybody that's not the executive branch. And what I say is, because we don't have the authority to limit the executive's power, if any, to investigate on the other side of the separation of powers moat, that what they should do is bring any such investigation out into the open to the extent that they can, which means if it's subject to executive session, so be it. If it meets the qualification, meet in secret. We don't change that. But absent that, let's do it in the daylight. And in any case, let's have a public hearing on whatever information they can provide. And then by majority vote of the select board can exercise what power it has without restriction from this particular condition of appropriation. So that's part A, which is a vote of the select board in open session, following a properly noticed public hearing. No town funds shall be expended for any matter relating to allocations of misconduct by the list of folks that I mentioned. I make exception to the expenditure of funds. And the exception of expenditure of funds fall into two categories. Those under control of the school committee, because we have no authority to control their spending, and spending more specifically, and I'll read this language, costs directly related to the work of town employees. The language will come up. The town employees working in the ordinary course of their work, consistent with their job descriptions. So I don't expect to be able to roll through a stop sign, and when the officer stops me, say thank you very much, but before you can give me a ticket, the select board is going to have to hold a public hearing and have a vote. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the situation that we are well aware of. And so if it's an internal review by town council's office without spending outside money, that's fine. An independent review by the Human Resources Department by Ann Braga, that's fine, she's an employee. But if you want to go spend outside money to investigate alleged misconduct on people outside, on the other side of that moat, have a public hearing, properly noticed, and a vote of the select board. This is not a decision that ought to be made by the staff in the dark. And so that said, we can, somebody has the language available, can put it up quite specifically. It's as I described.
Yeah, I think David Mark will show it if he's a co-host, which he is.
Okay, so start at the bottom. In the shall be expended on any matter relating to allegations of misconduct by. That's the list. And let me work our way up. The A and B are the exceptions. Funds expended under the control of the school committee and funds expended directly and indirectly. Indirectly meaning supplies and your office and sit in your chair, ride around in a patrol car, on town employees consistent with their job descriptions. Those are the exceptions. So if we, given those exceptions, the proposed condition of appropriation is accept by majority vote of the select board, voting in open session and following a properly noticed public hearing, no town funds other than the exceptions shall be expended on any matter related to allocations of misconduct by the list of folks here who are outside and on the other side of the moat from the executive. That's my motion for an addition to conditions of appropriation.
All right, thank you, Neil. We're going to go to some questions and comments from the group, but I'm also going to at some point call on Melissa and town council if town council is here. Not for their opinion necessarily as to the wisdom of such a proposal, but just to the both the sort of legality and the mechanisms by which it would be enforced. So Harry, why don't you go to the list?
Let me know when you want me to take it down.
Well, let's see what the questions look like, whether we need it up or not.
Perry Grossman.
Yeah, my question is for town council, if they could comment on the condition, on this condition of appropriation, if it's viable and if there are any issues with it, but I don't know if you want to hold off on that.
No, go ahead. Thank you, Joe, if you're here.
Sure. So there's lots of concerns I have with this. Let's see if I can keep it short. I guess I'd start off by saying if AC is interested in something like this, then they should engage with the select board's offer to talk about a policy. So for example, HR has the funding for an internal investigator. We always, the staff, had always anticipated an investigations policy once that person came on. It would be it would be needed to kind of protect that staff person, kind of like language that the federal government's inspector generals have. So there is a forthcoming investigations policy. If you wanted things like this in there, that's certainly something the select board would want to hear from you guys. This is a hammer when a scalpel is warranted. For example, if one of these members were to be alleged to have sexually harassed a employee, for example, or in the larger sense, anything within the jurisdiction of MCAD or EEOC who expect investigations for their allegations, we would be in a difficult problem having to air that out publicly before doing an investigation. So that would be problematic.
Mhm.
And I think EEOC would, or MCAD would look at that as an effort to silence complainants. So if this were to pass and we were to come in, to a situation like that, and we have had an investigation of an appointed board member for allegations of sexual harassment of a staff member, who's an appointed board member, I wouldn't want this to be handled in a public meeting. So you'd basically be forcing us to handle it internally, even if it was something that the investigations policy would say, like an elected official like the moderator or town clerk should not be handled internally. So I see lots of problems with this. And I would suggest if you're really interested in this, then you engage the select board in their offer to talk to you about future policies.
So can I respond to that? So I've heard the sort of extreme cases of sexual harassment came from a select board member who raised it. And I say, I don't want those exceptions because that will just cause someone to make that allegation. And that just negates the particular condition of appropriation. I think it was quite clear in my comments when we met with you, Joe, and with the town administrator, that I have less interest in negotiating some future policy that bridges the separate authority of the legislature and the executive. So on that particular point, thank you, but no thank you. To the extent that information doesn't have to be disclosed to the public, don't disclose it to the public. To the extent that it has to remain appropriately or can remain within executive session, keep it within executive session. And if the case is that all you can say is that there have been an allegation against one of these people on this very long list, there's 300 people or so on this list. I can't tell you who it is. I can't tell you what it is. I can't describe the complaint. I can't describe the complainant, and I can't describe the respondent. Have that conversation in public, call a public hearing. Some member of the public is going to say, I can't believe you're having a public hearing. I have no idea what you're talking about. And then the select board can apologize because they can't disclose it. And then they can go in executive session and do everything they do. But if they want to spend money externally, then they can vote. And they can have a vote that says, we can't tell you what this is about, but we're voting 3-2, 4-1, or however they feel like voting to authorize an external investigation. What you didn't tell me is whether it was legal or illegal, so I'll take the position that having not said it must be legal. If that's the extent of the public information, and if the public knows nothing and has nothing to comment on other than don't know anything, if that's the extent of the public hearing, so be it.
Thank you. Harry Bors.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. Because Neil brought up several things, not all of them right in line with this. I think what happened with Stanley was terrible, and I don't think the town stepped up when it should have. Having said that, it was a complaint that came from the outside toward him, and this won't stop that. That can still happen. As far as I know, I have not been reported to the state for an ethics violation. Of course, you'll never know because I would never say, but I can say this. I know of people who have, because in that case, when they're brought up for a state ethics violation, it's terrific. You don't get to be told who made the complaint about you. It's just, there's a complaint. That's it. It's sort of a star chamber. You're not allowed to tell anyone except for one designated person. I've been that designated person before. It is a very bizarre system. So perhaps you get a better hearing if it is held in-house, and whether that means completely in-house or whether you need a third party to show impartiality, I don't know. But those sort of things can still happen. To this list, and I guess what this is addressing, there are a couple of things that just quickly came to mind. You can fall into being one of these people on this list, and something you do may be egregious. It may have to do with sexual harassment. It may have to be
Alleged. We're talking
alleged.
alleged.
Okay. Allegedly caught in a compromising situation with someone illegally. It may have something to do with racial overtones. I mean, it could be a whole host of things, which in fact could bring a liability toward the town. And perhaps the town does need to look into it, and whether they have the capacity to do it objectively or not, I don't know. So this gets into the notion of the select board. If there's going to be an outside investigation or outside services that have to be paid for, that it has to be signed off by the select board. There needs to be some sort of hearing. And I'd like to know that there's really something in place to assure that when somebody is alleged to have done something, it doesn't wind up on a select board agenda. It becomes public knowledge before anybody has even looked to see whether or not it's been found to be true or not. I know often we've dealt with things and we've gone into executive session, then come out and just voted on the numbers and can't say. Although I don't see what this specifically says that in this amendment. And I don't know if it has to be said or if it should be said. I understand the spirit. The mechanics, I'm not sure how well they work and where the safeguards are.
All right, so my quick response is that this calls for only a public hearing and a public vote. It calls for no disclosure whatsoever. To the extent that any of these particular allegations would create public records, those records would be public anyway. But I'm not, as a condition of this, as this condition of appropriation, not causing the executive, not causing the select board in an agenda or otherwise to disclose information that they're not required to disclose. It doesn't say it, and it doesn't suggest it. The words read what they are. It requires a public hearing and a vote, properly noticed public hearing and a vote.
Okay, is an executive conversation the same as a public hearing?
Well, it requires a public hearing, meaning the public is allowed to comment.
Well, when we go into executive session, the public's not allowed to comment.
But the vote can't be held in the vote to appropriate money has to be held in public. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, that's true. The vote for it.
Yes, the vote.
Right. But a hearing, a public hearing, would be a conversation. It may have other people that have to be brought in for the conversation, but I don't think of an executive session as being a public hearing. I think of it being executive session.
So this would have to be a public vote and a public hearing. There is no conversation. The public has a right to be heard, and the select board, the executive, has no obligation to respond. And I don't create one here.
Well, okay. I'm still confused. If it's a hearing, by that you mean an open hearing.
Correct. Any member of the public.
So any member of the public can comment on the issue.
And give public comment, correct.
Okay. And what I'm saying is it may be better off in executive session rather than in the public in order to make some determinations and be able to ask questions.
This is not the place for questions and determinations, which, as we know, in one particular case that we've been talking about for weeks, was a decision and determination to spend money solely made by the town administrator, the staff. The staff, it was a staff decision to investigate 4 members of the advisory committee. There's a double count here, we know, and 5 town meeting members.
Right, that I understand.
Elected,
I'm
appointed,
looking for
elected and appointed, elected and appointed members of the legislature, where the town administrator, a town employee of the executive branch, made the sole decision to engage an outside investigator, right? And
that
caused,
I
as we
understand.
know.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
That's a different sort of conversation.
Correct.
What I'm looking at here is the issue. Somebody wants to make a spurious allegation against somebody. So that would have to be in a public comment at
No.
the select board, or could be an
Nope.
executive
No.
session.
No, doesn't say that. The only thing that would be public would be notice that the select board is going to be voting on the engagement of an outside somebody. It doesn't say what that is, right?
Okay.
Expending money externally. And the public has a right to speak. And the select board has no obligation to answer or provide any other information that they're not obligated by law to provide. So I understand your point, and I understand your concern. And I believe that the concern, right, it does not surface as a result of this condition.
Okay, I'm just worried that it creates a forum where people can make comments in public that just lay out there without any response. And if that's the best route to do this with. I agree that before the town goes to spend any money, there needs to be a conversation, and it needs to be an understanding that the select board needs to take a vote in front of people so that they take responsibility for making that decision. That I agree with. Okay, thanks.
Pam Lotus.
Okay, I'm here. I had and I'm mute. Looking at the whole list of people who want to talk about this. And it's really my strong opinion that this is not ready for prime time. I totally support Neil in bringing it to us. I would like to find a way to work it out, but not tonight, because we're going to have to wordsmith this to death. And it just feels like it's inappropriate for this, something that's significant, that a lot of us have strong feelings about, to be working on it at this point in the evening, in the process. And I would like to see perhaps be a warrant article or to sense of the community or whatever, but not a resolution is what I'm trying to say. But I do not support doing it tonight in this form.
Thank you. Elisa Jonas.
Well, I agree with Pam on that, but I also more strongly agree with Harry that this is, I just am so concerned that this is a recipe for disaster in our town. When I see the hostilities that come out against others publicly already now, the idea of when a complaint, as you said, we're very vulnerable because we take positions that may not be popular by other people, and they will and they have filed complaints that are spurious, as Harry said. And to make this to have public hearings on this is a really dangerous approach to take. I personally would much rather that the town indemnify people who are considered employees, who are then there is a complaint filed, and if they're found innocent, clearly this is something that we're all vulnerable to, and we need some kind of protection, and we're not getting that.
So,
I
so
don't,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so I don't see how that is gonna, I think it's gonna create more problems for the people who are gonna have complaints filed against them than at least indemnifying them for any costs if it turns out to be a spurious complaint. And I think that if something like that was in place, then the select board might think twice before pursuing something that's going to end up costing money if there's no good grounds for doing this.
We have a proximate case that is arguably spurious, that arguably had no good grounds. The respondents were told that they were being investigated for misconduct that could include charges of felonies, right, with fines and presumably jail time, right? They engaged counsel, which is completely appropriate, right? And yet the investigation finds no fault for 4 of them, right? And the very same executive branch is now unwilling to date, right, to reimburse them for actions taken solely by the town administrator, who admittedly has said, if I had it to do over again, I would do it differently, notwithstanding 2 days of advisory committee meetings, 2 hours each, obviously not full days, where we were told repeatedly that the town administrator and town council had no discretion. On the other hand, Chaz says I would have done it differently, which says to me that he obviously had discretion, because if he had no discretion, he would do it the same way every time, right? And so what we have here is, right, in the bigger picture, we have an entire population of voters who are now being chilled, right, and intimidated and discouraged from participating in government, contrary to public policy, right, because of the actions, right, of the town administrator solely, he said, right, of the actions of the town administrator, and now a select board who is saying, well, but it happened, and I don't know what's going on in executive session other than someone is deciding not to reimburse, and someone is presumably advising them not to reimburse this reasonable claim. And this should happen to nobody, right? And we can't control what goes on inside the executive. And what we heard, and I'll do this quickly, is repeated question of whether the select board has the authority at all to investigate anybody outside of the executive branch. I just listed everybody who's not in the executive branch, right? And whether the select board, what they refer to as town policy, is in fact the select board's policy. And does their policy apply to the people on this list? Arguably not, right? Except that it costs the latest set of respondents $24,000, right, to protect themselves against an arguably frivolous claim. And now they have no recourse. The notion that somehow their friends should have a GoFundMe, right, when the body who is at fault here is the executive, and they should just make them whole, right? And
Neil, I agree with you, but then how,
force them.
that's why they need to be indemnified. the
We
way
can't,
Stanley
well, we
finally
can't,
was.
we can't do that. And we can't bring a warrant article. We can't bring a warrant article until November. And by the way, there are statutes adopted by the town, right, that might in fact require indemnification. Stanley Spiegel was required to be indemnified, and yet the town resisted. The select board, under advice of who knows who,
Hey, Neil,
I
this is
just
turning
don't-
into a filibuster, so let's
So
I'm
let's
trying.
move on.
let's move on. Susan, you're on the list, but I need to get to the others first. Carlos.
Thank you, Harry. Since we were talking about privacy issues and other things that this could cost, I just had a question because I don't understand exactly when it applies and when it doesn't apply. When the executive session was for this discussion was noticed on the select board agenda, the names of the people who were involved were named. When is that appropriate and when is it not appropriate? Maybe this is a question for town council.
Joe?
Sure, I addressed that in an earlier meeting. It's a difference between them being investigated, which was never disclosed publicly, and them making a claim in a letter in March 11th. So it was the fact that they made a claim and only the select board can settle claims. So then it went to the select board to decide whether to settle that claim. And because of the open meeting law specificity requirement about litigation, they knew we were going to the select board. They gave us a deadline, so we met before their deadline. So if we did not identify them, the only people that would not know about that would be the public, which is the exact opposite of the purpose of the open meeting law. So the open meeting law requires disclosure and specificity of people, the litigation that you're talking about in using that exemption. I do have a issue about the exemption for the executive session that Neil was talking about. That's why I have my hand raised. I can address it now, or you can take me later.
Go ahead while you're talking.
Why don't you go now?
Sure. I read Neil's condition of appropriation being in open session, and then he corrected me and said that it could be handled in executive session, but then the public vote is only in open session. That's what we do with the liability fund transfers. So I understand that process. The problem in applying that here is you're using open meeting law exemption purpose 1, and the person whose reputation you're talking about has the right to be there and ask for it to be an open session. So if you look at open meeting law executive session purpose 1, that would be very problematic. And again, in the situation of something that was investigated by EEOC or MCAD. So Neil assumed, I said the condition of appropriation is legal on its face, yes, but as applied, I can see lots of ways that it would be illegal. So if it were to pass and this situation were to arise, I would say you cannot do that because that's incurring liability under EEOC and MCAD. Jurisprudence about like chilling complainants and exposing complainants publicly. So as applied, that would absolutely be illegal.
If they don't need to be named under the current approval by the town administrator, then they don't need to be named with approval by the select board, except that vote to spend money would need to be made under my condition in open session. Doesn't require anything that would otherwise need to be disclosed. 0. If it can be,
I would disagree. Absolutely disagree.
So I don't understand it, because if it can be withheld, all I'm asking is for a public vote to spend money, on an outside investigation.
Because if Chaz was doing this decision, it's not covered by the open meeting law. If the select board is doing that, making that decision, it is covered by the open meeting law. So the rules of a public body's decision is different than the rules for a staff person.
Only the vote to engage an outside contractor. That's all I'm asking for, to be publicly disclosed.
Harry, can I continue my question?
Yeah.
So, Joe, it's always So the law doesn't permit non-disclosure. You always have to name the people in the executive session.
When we're defending, I would say yes, because
Well,
you know, the other person knows that you're going to the select board. The claimant knows you're going to the select board. So we would
Right,
we
but
would
is that-
we
but
would
it
withhold
does-
it if we were like filing suit against someone and they don't know yet, and we wouldn't, you know, disclose that we're going to file suit against somebody in case the select board says don't file suit. But when we're defending, almost always, yeah.
Okay, so the law, so is that your interpretation or is that the law? I'm just confused.
It's the requirements of the Attorney General's Office Division of Open Government. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Susan Granoff.
Okay, I have a couple of questions just to clarify some things. Seems to me what triggered.
Susan, could you make sure that when you ask your question, you direct it to someone who may be able to answer?
Yes, I was going to say these are directed toward Neil. It seems that what you're saying that triggers this is not the filing of a complaint, or not even the decision to investigate something internally, but the expenditure involving some sort of external expenditure. Now, it's not clear how broad that is, but first, I just wanted to clarify, is that what you're saying?
That is correct, and it's there
Okay.
so that, it's there so
Okay,
that,
let
for
me
example,
go on to the.
I'll give you the reason. It's there so that those who are enabled and authorized to enforce, for example, the town's bylaws or the traffic laws can give a
Right.
town meeting member a citation for not clearing snow. I'm not looking for indemnity and exemption from anything. That-
Right, okay. Let me just get to the main question that I have. You need to specify what you mean by funds expended. Because right now it's not clear, it's vague and overbroad. And it also seems not to be what you're actually stating is the primary purpose, which is what you said at the end of the response to Carlos, I believe, which is to do this only when money is going to be expended involving hiring of someone to conduct an investigation.
So that's not what I'm
Okay,
saying.
then please elaborate
Because
on
I
that.
don't want to get caught up in the semantics of investigation or any other term that might be used in lieu of investigation when I'm carving out of the exceptions. And the exceptions are funds under control of the schools because we have no authority, okay? And money that is spent internally on employees. So as soon as it's not an employee, that's where I've drawn the line.
Okay, so for example, if there's a complaint and we wanted, and for whatever reason, part of the negotiated agreement involves having the employee consult with a drug counselor or something like that.
That's a negotiated agreement. That's not an allegation of misconduct.
There's an allegation of misconduct as a rationale for termination of an employee. As a result of that, there's discussion and a decision to require that employee, if that person wants to retain their job, to consult with a psychiatrist or a therapist or whatever, a drug counselor. At that point, we would then have to have that kind of public hearing. Is that correct?
There is, I've said this a number of times, there is no requirement for disclosure of any details other than the vote.
Okay, but that would be something that would implicate. That would be
No.
something that would fall under. That would be considered an external expense.
The employee wouldn't need to be named. The agreement wouldn't need to be disclosed. Nothing would need to be disclosed that isn't required to be disclosed now.
Okay, And in fact, the more I think about it, if that person isn't a member of the non-executive branch, and I assume every employee is actually a member of the executive branch in one way or another, then they're not part of that limited list, the elected and appointed officials.
An ordinary course employee, not on the advisory committee, not a town meeting
Right.
member, doesn't apply to them.
Right. So that then doesn't apply. So it's simply, this would apply when there's, but what do you mean by external expense? It's a very vague statement.
It doesn't say external expense. It is no town funds. And
Okay,
then
so does that
no
mean
town
somebody who,
funds, except
does
for
that
the
mean a
exceptions.
salaried official who's spending hours on a case involving like someone in the town council's office?
They can spend as much time as they want.
Okay, so that's not considered an expenditure.
It's an
Suppose they needed
exception.
overtime or something like that.
It's a stated exception. They're employees doing their job within the confines of their job description. They can do that. That's not subject to this condition.
Will you say on town employees? Do you mean by town employees? Funds expended directly and indirectly on town employees. Do you actually mean by town employees?
Well, it's the spending is not by the police officer. It's the spending on the police officer. If that's not the right word, then help me.
Okay, I think I understand what you're trying to accomplish. I just am concerned that the wording is not clear. And I think that that could lead to a lot of unintended consequences that would undercut what you're trying to accomplish. And I just think it needs a little bit more discussion and wordsmithing. And I don't think we can really do it at the session tonight.
Thank you. Dennis, you had a question.
Yeah, this is like extending on something that I think Harry Bors was getting at earlier, and I wanted to understand if this was one of the things that was on Harry's mind, which was the question of whether or not such a provision could be weaponized by someone who intended to cause harm to someone else. This is not a question for Neil yet. This was a question for Harry, because I wasn't sure if that's where you were going with this. Was that the fact that there were requirements for public discussion of any sort, whether a clever person could abuse these provisions in a way that would be harder to sweep under the rug is the wrong way of describing it, because I don't want to imply that anyone would do that, but just the idea of dispatching things in a sensitive way. Or were you imagining that might be harder if this was in place?
Well, I think my concern was where the dividing line is between what has to be done in public versus what can be done in an executive session. That in essence, somebody's, honor for better or worse gets held up in the public square without full context, without full discussion. I think that gets risky. From listening to Neil, I don't think that's his intent, but it's not clear to me the way it's written that that's exactly how it would play out or could play out, not assuming anybody else's motivations when something like this comes up. What has struck me is at this point, we've conflated a lot of ideas, and we seem to have a lot of different understandings, but perhaps not one common understanding of exactly what the wording means. So I'm going back to what Susan said and Elisa and a few others. Intention aside, I understand the intention. Is this the best way to write it to get just what we want, or to have it clear enough for everybody to understand where the edges are. And I'm not even sure where the edges are, particularly after hearing some of the things from Joe Callahan, as to what we can even actually do or not do. So.
Thank you.
David Mark.
Thank you. Melissa had her hand up a second ago. I don't know if she wants to say anything now before I start.
It was more on Harry Bors's point, and Dennis's question, as an example of something that actually did happen at one point. We had an example of a member that was on the list that Neil had, that at a public meeting said a dirty joke at the expense of a department head. That department head then filed a complaint with HR. And so I think that having the requirement of a public hearing very well could dissuade people from making those kinds of complaints. But then I think there's also, problems with, employee rights and privacy and things like that that might also occur in trying to enforce this particular condition as well. So.
Okay, thank you. I had 3 questions. Carlos asked my first one. The other 2 don't really need to be answered. I really don't understand why the Casella 5 were not indemnified like Stanley Spiegel, since they were clearly acting in their capacity as town meeting members. The second question is, I remember somebody, might have been Regina several years ago, said that advisory committee members were considered special employees under the state definition. I don't know if that's true or not, but if that's the case, that would really complicate everything given the wording of Neil's amendment here.
Can you explain what that means, please?
I'm not really sure. We never really discussed it past that. My comment, which is very brief, is that what we're talking about here and what we have been talking about is really not financial policy. It is a town policy. And I'm not sure that this town policy should be put in a condition of appropriation where we're talking about spending money. It would be much better to create a policy and put it in a bylaw and bring it back in November. Because this belongs in a bylaw, it doesn't belong as a condition of appropriation.
As I said, I can't make.
Neil,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I just want to say this could be seen, and we're talking about optics tonight, by the town meeting body as just a jab against the select board and 6th floor, rather than a serious argument about something that should be in a bylaw. And I think we should take a step back and do it right, rather than just say, oh, they put something in the budget to just, jab at the select board. So I think the optics are not really good. And I would just recommend that we bring it back as a bylaw in the fall. And that's all I wanted to say.
Dennis,
My quick
Yeah,
response.
well, after we do, Harry, what were you saying?
I was just going to say, I have nobody else from the committee on the list.
Okay, so let's go let Neil get, one last word here, and then
So
we can.
this is not retaliation, right? This is not retaliation. This is a control over spending of a recommendation that the advisory committee is making to town meeting, and the town meeting will, in one form or another, approve, because I believe, and I believe that many of us believe, that the behavior and the spending in the current fiscal year on the incident that has been described and described and discussed, right, was inappropriate spending, and that we that it is appropriate for us to put a condition on the executive so that they don't engage in that sort of frivolous spending again against members of the legislature and others outside of their control. Because to the extent that weaponization might occur with this in place, I assure you it is way more dangerous for weaponization to occur. And it's a long list, right? Including our 5 colleagues, included David Lescoyer, And I don't know how many others, right, who might argue that they were weaponized for doing their job. The weaponized, I put in quotes, it's not pejorative, it's a shorthand comment. But yeah, I think there are risks either way. If the issue is public hearing, I'll drop public hearing, but I do want a public vote by the select board if they're going to spend money this way.
So I've got a bit of a dilemma here. Marty, I cannot call on you because you're not a member of the committee, and we had public comment at the beginning as much as I might like to. Joe, I'm reluctant to call on you because this is not a back and forth. But given your position, I will give you time to make a brief comment.
And all I'm trying to do is offer an answer to David Mark's question about why this was handled differently than Stanley Spiegel. So if you don't
Very
want
good.
that answer, I don't have to, I can pass.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I wasn't here for the decision about Stanley Spiegel, but when confronted with a similar circumstance while I was here, Neil was addressing it. We defended the other town officials, but we did not indemnify them. That was a decision of the select board for later. Ultimately, the investigation did not go forward. What we've been doing since I've been here is if it's a complaint by a third party, we will defend the town official. If it's a complaint within the town, like many complaints by an officer who alleged she was retaliated against and 20 different police officers were investigated. Because it's a employee versus employee, we don't defend them. They have to get their own counsel if they need it, unless we think the allegation has merit, that there's a predicate to it, that we believe that there's a reasonable grounds that something happened. In that case, like in Chief Gonzalez, we prosecuted that. Here, yes, we prosecuted that because there's much discussion about it was just a picture. I want to point you to the report. There was a lot of other things going on. So we thought there was merit to it. That's why we did not indemnify them.
Okay, because I remember Alec putting something in the chat a couple of meetings ago, which would seem that what they were doing was completely legal and in their capacity as town meeting members, and town meeting members, are allowed to do that. So I don't understand, the idea that you would not indemnify them since they were acting in their town meeting capacity. Maybe Alec, if you can put that in the chat really fast, you can read it.
I don't think he should, but I can address his point. That was one aspect. That was one allegation of the miasma we were facing. On hindsight, people are describing it as just a picture. There was much more at the front of it that was concerning enough that we thought it needed to be investigated. So it wasn't just the picture, and it wasn't just OCPF rules applying to town meeting members. You had a town meeting member falsely representing himself to subcontractors of the town. You had an AC member in our communications with a union. The union was threatening to bring labor charges against the town. So it was more than just a picture. And it was more than just these AC members, because we weren't sure if employees were involved. There's also a footnote in there that we weren't sure a non-department DPW employee was involved. So you're looking at it in hindsight. You have to understand all the allegations we were facing in May of last year.
I just need to make a comment. You're looking at it now in hindsight. Dennis and I were looking at it at the time. And at the time, we said this was a nothing. We said this was stupid. We said, don't waste your time investigating this. So you may be looking at it in hindsight, but we weren't looking at it in hindsight. We were looking at it as two intelligent people who could see that this was worthless. And
that
so
did not have all the facts.
I didn't need the facts, Joe, because we could see what this was. This was stupid. And if your judgment and your advice was to go forward with this, then it was incorrect, to say it mildly. Dennis, where do we go?
I think we're going to go to a vote on Neil's proposed amendment to the conditions of appropriation.
So I will move it as it was displayed, and given the concerns and the lack of information that may be forthcoming anyway, which, as I said, is fair. If what doesn't need to be disclosed doesn't need to be disclosed. And so I would strike the language and following a properly noticed public hearing. So I will move it absent that language. So it's except by majority vote of the select board voting in open session. No town.
David, Mark,
fund-
could you show it again, please, David, Mark, if you shall have it up?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
So Neil, which language? I'm sorry, just
So the in the first sentence, it's the
right.
first line. At the end of the first line, the word begins and following a properly noticed public hearing. Strike that.
Okay. So except by majority vote of the select board voting in open session, no
Right.
no town funds other than. Okay, thank
Correct.
you. All right, you can take that down, David. Mark, I will bring up
Dennis,
yes.
I will second.
Oh, thank you. Striking the requirement for public hearing, properly noticed public hearing. All right. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for amending the conditions of appropriation to, as discussed, Michael Berger,
No.
Harry Boers,
For now, a no.
Cliff Brown,
No.
Elise Couture Stone,
No.
David Mark Goldstein,
I agree with what he's trying to do, but it needs to be a bylaw. No.
Neil Gordon,
Yes.
Susan Granoff,
I agree with David Mark, so I will vote no. Sorry.
all right, Perry Grossman,
No.
Elisa Jonas,
No.
Janice Kahn,
No.
Brian Ladd,
No.
Alec Lovovitz,
Abstain.
Carol Levin, if you're still here. I think she had to drop. Pam Lodish,
No.
Jocelyn Murphy,
Abstain.
Donnell O'Neill,
I think he has left.
right? Linda Olson Pelkey,
I believe she has left.
Fran Perler,
Sadly, I'd have to say no, but I agree it should be pursued.
David Pollock,
No.
Carlos Ridwejo.
What David Mark said, no.
I can't do that transitive closure thing. Margaret Robotham,
No.
Christine Westfall,
Abstain.
Harry Friedman.
Yes.
Okay, so 2 in favor, 15 opposed, 3 abstentions. The amendment fails. Neil, are you planning on proposing this at town meeting also, or not? I'm just curious. You have
Undecided.
the right, of course.
Undecided. I might.
Okay. All right, so now we need to take a vote on the conditions of appropriation. I think we've already discussed.
I will move them.
Thank
Second.
Michael,
Yes.
Harry, B,
Yes.
Cliff,
Yes.
Elise,
Can you come back to me?
sure. David Martin,
Yes.
Neil,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Harry,
Yes.
Elisa,
Yes.
Janice,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Alec,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Jocelyn,
Yes.
Linda, not Linda, Fran,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
Margaret,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Harry,
Yes.
Elise.
Yes.
All right, so 20-0. Favorable action on the conditions of appropriation. Harry, what else is on the agenda for tonight? Because I apologize.
Nothing.
I wasn't here. Nothing. Then tell us what's happening later in the week,
So on,
where I may or may not be here.
right, tomorrow night, Thursday, we have a Zoom meeting at 7. We will be going through the Community Preservation Act appropriations, which is WA 9, WA 11, structure of CTONS, WA 12.
I just want to say we have an update on 11. The subcommittee met at 6. Rebecca Stone and CTONS have come to an agreement on common language, so we voted in favor of that. So we'll have a motion ready for tomorrow night.
Okay, warrant article 12, posting public record requests, and warrant article 24, email usage by boards and committees. That is tomorrow night, and then we have established one more meeting for Tuesday, May 12, a Zoom meeting where we're going to do Chestnut Hill West, STM 1 and 2.
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank everybody for, I spent a good portion of the weekend and the last couple of days editing combined reports, but universally high quality materials. I just want to thank everybody. It's really nice when when the raw materials are good to start working with. So Melissa, you should have everything. I'm up to later tonight finishing. I understand I have a budget to adjust.
I'm going to bed after this.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'll check in with you tomorrow. But thanks everybody, and thanks Harry for running this meeting and for chairing tomorrow night as well.
Thanks, Harry.
All right. Good night.
Thanks, Harry.
Good night, everybody.
Yep. Thanks, Harry. Night.
Good night.
Night.